and welcome everybody to the April 17th meeting of the Amherst Planning Board. The first item on our agenda tonight is to review and approve the minutes from April 3rd. Does anyone on the board have any comments or changes on those minutes? Yes, thank you, Ms. Presto.
I move to approve the April 3rd meeting minutes.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? Thank you. And moving on to the next item. I'm going to take 1 second here and just get organized. All right. In accordance with the provisions of Sections 5 and 11 of Chapter 40A, these public hearings have been duly advertised and notice thereof has been posted and mailed to the Mass Department of Housing and Community Development, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and to abutting towns. These hearings are being held for the purpose of providing an opportunity for interested citizens to be heard regarding the proposed amendments to the Amherst zoning bylaw. These amendments will be on the warrant for the annual town meeting. Item A1613, locational requirements for non-conforming structures in mixed-use centers. To amend Article 9, non-conforming lots, uses, and structures by adding a new section 9.3, which establishes design requirements for changes to non-conforming structures in the BG, BL, BVC, BN, and COM districts. That's general business, limited business, village center business, neighborhood business, and commercial. This item is article brought by the planning board, developed by the zoning subcommittee, and so I'll ask the zoning subcommittee to begin the discussion. Mr. Crowner.
Okay, so this is, we discussed this last time around, and you'll note the changes that were made in response to your suggestions, which were very helpful. I think the article is much improved. What this article does is it would add a new section to Article 9 of the zoning bylaw that would require non-conforming structures or non-conforming uses, when they're making additions to the property, to come into conformance with what we're proposing to be the new front setback dimensions. So in other words, we want buildings to be pulled forward where possible, and that's what this language proposes to do. You note on the back there's an escape valve, 9.313. If for some reason, for safety, aesthetics, sustainable site design, historic environmental preservation needs, there is a possibility that provision could be waived. So it's not, locking us into something that we might not actually want to do. It's providing flexibility, but at the same time, trying to guide future development in a way that creates pedestrian-friendly, nice streetscape, mixed-use centers. So that's the purpose of this. It's intended to be a companion to Articles 31 and 32, which in various ways increase potential density in the mixed-use centers, and also in their own way add some things that were formerly considered or formerly part of form-based design regulations that we've talked about in the past. So that's what this is. This is actually coming out of the form-based design proposal from 2 years ago, but we think that it fits into Article 9, which deals with non-conforming structures, and that's what this applies to. So I guess I would also note that if Article 32 is adopted, many structures that are now conforming with regard to front setback would become non-conforming, and so that's what this is intended to address, those buildings. Right now, we have a minimum setback, but no maximum. We're proposing to add a minimum and a maximum, and some buildings would exceed the maximum. So we don't want to encourage that in the future. And the ZSC recommended this unanimously to the planning board.
Thank you, Mr. Crowner. So just by way of background, which is that a non-conforming lot use or structure is one that was built or constructed prior to a change in the zoning bylaw. So in this case, we're proposing to, in another amendment, to change the zoning bylaw to establish maximum and minimum lot setbacks. Currently, as long as you're set back a certain amount, you can go back as far as you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is intended to be a companion to that, to push development closer to the street for pedestrian-friendly, as in the center of town here, versus a strip mall with parking spaces in front.
Exactly.
Did anyone else from the zoning subcommittee have any comments on this? Yes, Mr. Tucker.
Not so much in terms of Article 32, but this would address also any buildings that were non-conforming, period.
Right.
For instance, during the discussions by the zoning subcommittee, there were a number of buildings discussed as examples, and one of them was non-conforming in terms of its lot coverage. It was a building around which a sea of asphalt had been created, and that essentially covered the entire lot and was non-conforming in terms of lot coverage. So even those buildings as well would be affected by this.
So this is pre-existing non-conforming, in layman's terms, means it's grandfathered in under the old bylaw unless you change something.
Right, and if you change it, we want you to start bringing it into conformance.
Any questions from the rest of the planning board? How about comments from the public? Please come forward, identify yourself, and let us know what you think.
I'm Melissa Perot from Precinct 1, and I would like to ask why COM has been included in this. I feel that the locations, the requirement that location be upfront on the street is not appropriate for the COM district, where you might want to have noisy or machinery or whatever further back, and it seems that it restricts where you can put the buildings in the commercial district to best advantage, depending on what they are and how they relate to the rest of the area. So I question why you included COM in this and actually in the other rezoning.
Yes,
I
Mr.
can
Crown.
respond to that. So what we're doing with all of these articles is we're reimagining how we think about our mixed-use centers, and we're recognizing that all of our mixed-use centers, or all of our business zones, including COM, we really want to think of them as village centers of a type, with each having slightly different dimensional requirements, slightly different use requirements. But in general, we want them to be pedestrian friendly. We want them to be to have a streetscape. We don't actually expect that, in our recent history indicates that there is not going to be heavy industry coming to Amherst. It's not going to happen. There's not going to be malls. So rather than perpetuate something that is not really working, not really what a lot of people want, we're starting to change how we think about our mixed-use centers. And so the COM is part of that.
So I would just add to that, Ms. Perot, that this would affect this particular amendment that we're talking about, the locational requirements for existing non-conforming structures, doesn't affect any new buildings going up. This is for lots that are already non-conforming, right? So it's not for new construction. It's for changes or additions to existing uses or structures. I don't know if that adds anything, but it is a,
Well, in
you know,
the location, in the COM location, there are existing structures. And I think they need to, since they're barns, I think they need to be used to the best advantage. And I would not want to see that restricted by this. And also, I don't think that COM is really a zoning area that is appropriate for village centers, the way you're describing the kind of streetscape and so forth that you're talking about. I don't think that's where we would expect to find that in the COM district. And I think it should be excluded from the proposal. I think the village center zoning that otherwise that you've included seems to me to be appropriate. But COM is not a village center. It's quite clearly not. So it's very different. And I don't think it requires this kind of regulation in order to best use it. And I think it's a difficult zone to use, and I would like to allow it to be what it is and not try and lump it into something that it isn't in terms of a village center.
thank you, Ms. Pro. Mr. O'Keefe?
The one thing I wanted to add was to repeat the point that Mr. Crowner made earlier about section 9.313, which does create the ability to have a modification or waiver to the requirements here, so that this regulation would allow us to create the types of centers that Mr. Crowner described with retail and storefronts pushed up close to the street. But if something was being proposed that would be better situated further away, then this would allow that to happen as well.
Thank you, Mr. O'Keefe. I think that, in my mind, applying, and this is in a way to answer Ms. Pro's question as well, but just a general, what we're trying to do here, we've included COM in a number of our amendments, and I think it's out of and I'm just speaking for myself, that to me it makes sense to include all of our business districts when we're talking about making these changes. And in the ways that COM is different from the other business districts that seem to be working better than COM, I would like to see COM become more like them. And if we're going to apply new standards to them, I'd like to see COM included. Sort of my position on that. All right, anyone else from the public? Sure, come on up, but just real quickly. Wait till you get to the mic for the folks at home.
Melissa Perot again.
Be surprised.
I mean, what you've said is that you're really changing the zoning, and I think that needs to be more upfront and explicit. You're trying to make COM into more of a BG or B, whatever. And I think we need to have that clear and straightforward for the community to respond to. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. All right, anyone else?
Janet Keller, Precinct 1. So I want to say that in terms of this piece of the package, that I'm, it's more, it's hard to express a concern about this piece of the package per se. What I do want to express is a continuing concern with how the commercial, how commercial is treated within the package as a whole. And I want to express that that's a continuing concern with the folks in North Amherst. So it's with the package as the whole, with the complexity of the package as a whole, with our attempts to understand it and what it means for us, and with our understanding that it seems to be pretty intense and pretty extensive. So the concern is less with the actual pieces of this, but this is piece of a package that has to work together if it's going to work decently. And we have a great concern with how commercial is treated, how that would work in North Amherst, the extent of it, and the intensity of it at this point, and would love to have another opportunity at it to bring that back a little. So that's basically where we're coming from. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Any comments from the board? All right, this being a town meeting article, we have some choices about what we can do with this. We can recommend that town meeting pass it. We can recommend that town meeting reject it. We can recommend that town meeting refer it back to us, or we could present it in an amended fashion, right?
Can I add another?
In another one.
So this does refer to a minimum maximum setback area. If Article 32 does not pass, this becomes less comprehensible. So it may be that if 32 does not pass, we don't necessarily want to go forward with this.
Thank you, Mr. Croner. I see your point. All right, does anyone want to make a motion on this? Oh, we need, first of all, we need a motion on the public hearing.
I move to close public hearing.
All in favor? And a motion on the article? Mr. Croner.
I move that the planning board recommend Article 35 for acceptance by town meeting, except that if Article 32 does not pass, I would recommend that Article 35 be referred.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Tucker?
Just as a point of information, it would be possible to move an amended version of this within, not recommending this one way or another, but just so that you know that it's possible, within the scope of the language as it stands, essentially requiring that things come to existing front setback, whatever that is, rather than a front setback range, which is referring to the changes under Article 32. That could be done with, and we could prepare such an amended motion if that was something the board was interested in doing. Those setbacks are different than is what is established under the range, and you might want to look at those, but that is an option.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. I think after our discussion about this last time about how we really, that range of setback is, or that is I see it as a critical part of this, and I wouldn't want to go forward with it without it. Ms. Brestrup?
Sorry, I missed who seconded the motion.
All right. We have a motion. Any further discussion? All in favor of recommending, except we'll withdraw it if 32 fails.
Excuse me, not withdraw, asked it to be
Referred back. That's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Our next public hearing is A1713, fraternity residence, RF dimensions. This is in the RF zoning district, and this is also brought by the zoning subcommittee and the planning board. This would ask town meeting to amend Table 3 dimensional regulations to allow for modification of specific dimensions, building coverage, lot coverage, and maximum height under a special permit in the fraternity residence district. Mr. Crowner.
Again, you've seen this one before. There are no changes since the first time that we brought it. What this would do is would add footnote A to 3 lines of the dimensional table for one zone only, the RF zone. Those lines being maximum building coverage, maximum lot coverage, maximum height. Footnote A allows the special permit granting authority to modify those particular dimensions where it's appropriate and within the context of the dimensions in the existing neighborhood. The reason for this is that the RF zone covers 2 distinct and very different areas in town. And it doesn't make sense to have the same dimensions necessarily apply to both. We want to allow the flexibility for one area in particular to have a potentially a larger building, a more intense use than these dimensions would otherwise allow. So those areas of the zone are on Olympia Drive, which is a less intense area, and on North Pleasant Street, right in the heart of campus almost, which conceivably could have a much more intense use than would be allowed here. So we don't know of any particular proposal, but if something might happen, if something could happen, if somebody wants to do something, we want to provide the flexibility for the permit granting body to allow a larger building, and thereby soak up presumably more student housing. So again, this was a 3-0 vote of the zoning subcommittee for recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Crowner. Any questions from the planning board? Comments? Yes, Ms. Ford.
I just want to make sure that, that this A is the same A that appears after maximum floors and basic minimum front setback. It's the same note for all of those items.
Yes.
Okay, there's not.
In essence, it's just allowing,
It's there already. It's just adding it to those other 3. Okay. Just
all right. So any comments from the public? Going once? Going twice? All right, could we have a motion, please? It's Mr. O'Keefe.
I move to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. We will now deliberate on this article. Any more comments from the planning board? No one? Mr. O'Keefe?
I'll make a comment to just say that I'm going to vote in favor of adopting this. I think that if we're going to have uses related to student housing anywhere in town on the campus of the University of Massachusetts is pretty much the best
That's like the
possible
Holy
place to put them, so.
It is the Holy Grail. And I agree with you, Mr. O'Keefe. I'm in favor for the same reason. All right, any further discussion? All right, we have the same options on the, as the last one.
I move that Planning Board recommend Article 34 for adoption by town meeting.
I'll second.
Thank you very much. Further discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. All right. We will now move to our next public hearing. And this is a, Mr. Tree Warden, won't you join us?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'll be
Mr. Rosner,
recusing myself here
okay?
for a potential conflict.
Thank you, Mr. Rosner.
I wonder if Mr. Rosnoy understands that this is the Scenic Roads public hearing on Leverett Road?
Oh,
and It's
I'm,
not the Unitarian Church?
no, I understood, yeah.
We did, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it was previously up when I did.
While you're getting set up, I'll read our preamble. This is a joint meeting with the Amherst Planning Board and the Tree Warden. Welcome. This is a Scenic Road Shade Tree public hearing. In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 5C, Scenic Roads, and Chapter 87, Section 3, Shade Trees, this joint public hearing between the Planning Board and Tree Warden has been duly advertised in the Hampshire Gazette and posted in Town Hall. Proposed driveway construction, Leverett Road, map 3C, parcels 107 and 108. Public shade trees potentially impacted by this project include the following: 24-inch white pine, 11-inch red oak, 34-inch sugar maple. Impacts include removal or root damage. Impacts may also include disturbance of a portion of a stone wall. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you're planning. You can speak into the mic, please. You can take it off the stand if you'd like. Yeah.
My name is Joseph Aimwa. We are the one developed this 2 lots. Actually, it was originally 4 lot was subdivided into. It was 1 lot that was subdivided into 4 lots, and we happen to be buying 2 of the lots. Here, these are the 2 lots in question. I plan to have driveways, road driveway. And part of the development driveway, happen that will be removing. This is this location. Plan to remove 2 trees. That will process.
You need to speak into the microphone.
Our plan is to remove 2 trees there as a part of the driveway, to the 2 lots. Actually, it's 2 trees, not a tree. Sugar maple and white pine.
Okay. And there was a third one mentioned.
I think third one, as you said, okay.
Yes, Mr. Snow. You could introduce yourself for the folks at home.
Alan Snow, Tree Warden. At a site visit, I discovered another marker that had been flagged. It actually took the oak tree, the 11-inch oak tree, out of the public way, made it a private tree. So that's not, should not be included in this hearing.
Thank you.
So if you look at this picture, basically what we are looking at, excuse me, this is sugar maple, and that's the pine tree.
All right, I think we get the idea.
For the stone wall, we don't actually see any any stone there based on what, by observation, walking around the area, there's not really stone wall there.
Mr. Snow, did you have comments about this that you'd like to share with us?
The way the driveway is proposed right now, there's really no way to preserve the trees. Is that your question?
I guess I'm
Just a general comment on the project?
sure we're here to, you know more about this than we do, so anything you have to contribute would be most welcome.
So, the only way to really preserve any of the trees, if there was an attempt to preserve them, would be to, in my opinion, move the driveway possibly further north. I'm not sure if that's possible to do. Feasibly, the white pine could be taken out of the request for removal at that point.
And Ms. Brestrup.
Just wanted to say a little about the context here. Mr. Amua is going before the Zoning Board of Appeals to have his 2 flag lots approved with a special permit, and the Zoning Board will be reviewing the location of the driveway as it's proposed. I understand that they have some concerns over site distance, particularly going in the northerly direction, and Mr. Amua has made a plan to cut back the slope along Leverett Road as well as to widen the driveway entrance a little so that the site distance is improved. And I spoke with the building commissioner today, and he attends the zoning board hearings, and Mr. Amua has already been before the zoning board once, and he's going back in a week or so. So Mr. Mora, who's the building commissioner, couldn't really say, how detrimental moving the driveway north would be. But I think there is currently 180 feet of site distance allowed, given Mr. Amua's plan now. And if the driveway were to move north, it would lessen that site distance to 170 feet or, perhaps 160 feet. So I just wanted to put that in context for you. So you would understand that. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Brestrup. The planning board did hold a site visit on March 20th. And they noted that there was the remnants of a stone wall along the right-of-way line, so there's likely there are remnants of a stone wall on this property as well. Were there any comments from anyone who attended that site visit? Yes.
Well, Mike,
Kruger.
sort of pertaining to the stone wall issue, I don't know exactly how it's going to relate to what's before us tonight, but we had another lot, not these, that we looked at, and we had asked in our permit condition that if remnants of the stone wall were there, that the stones be left on the site. And I walked around that other site, and I couldn't find any stones or pile of stones or whatever. So I just have a concern if we make that kind of a decision of how, I was disappointed, so how we would actually follow up. And that applicant isn't here, so I can't really address it with them. But just concerned about how we deal with what might be a stone wall under that sort of berm that's there by the road. So.
Ms. Brestrup.
I did go out there today, and I looked for the stone wall, and I saw remnants of a stone wall at one end of, probably the southern end of Mr. Amua's property. And there were scattered stones in among the trees there, but when I kicked the debris aside, I didn't find stones below that. So my impression is that in the area where Mr. Amua is proposing a driveway, there may be stones there that have been placed there because they were in the way of something that was going on the site, but I don't actually think there is a wall there. And there are lots of trees growing up exactly where those stones have been placed. So,
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
My recollection of our site visit, and looking at the 3 trees, now it's only 2 trees, is that, in my opinion, and I'm not a tree expert, they had no redeeming value. They looked pretty sick, pretty dead, pretty picked over, and that, in my opinion, that the loss of these trees would not be a detriment to the scenic roadway in this area.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Snow?
So this goes kind of back to what we always come to this when we have these hearings about scenic roads is, what defines a scenic road? If you drive north on Levitt Road, it's like flicking a switch when you go from the town line of Amherst into Leverett. Very wooded, lots of old maple trees, mostly by the road, full of cavities and decay. When you come into Amherst, you have now lawn, tree-lined street. On this corner here, where this project is proposed, there's still kind of a remnant of the wooded road kind of that was there, the scenic road. Old trees help make the scenic road. The white pine is perfectly healthy. Classic kind of forest tree, a little scraggly, has been pruned, but I don't really notice anything wrong with it. The sugar maple is, again, a very old sugar maple tree. It still has buds on most of the twigs that are up there now. What's left is alive. Does have cavities. Doesn't appear to pose an immediate hazard to the public way. But again, what defines a scenic road? What do we want as a town to define a scenic road? This type of tree canopy often is a definition to me of a scenic road. So I think it does have value, redeeming value.
Mr. Crowner?
I agree with that. I think that what he's saying is right. It's old trees in particular that are scenic, and I'm also not a tree expert, so I probably know even less about the health of the trees. I thought the northernmost tree was particularly important for the scenic aspect. I don't know which one that is even. So I think there would be a loss of the scenic value of the road if those trees came down, in particular that tree. And also, every time we take down a tree, it makes all the other trees more important for the scenic value and more important for all the other things that they provide. So it's tough.
Ms. Ford?
So, we've heard that there's some issues about possibly moving the driveway further north, but has there actually been an effort made to chart that and do a plan that shows what the implications would be to your subdivision plan or future development if you were going to do that? And I also say that because I don't completely understand the issue with the sight line. Is it from traffic coming from the north down the road that?
Move the driveway this on the southern part here. There's a chance that we're going to be disturbing more trees. That is what we discussed with you last time. If we decide to move the driveway, there's a chance that we're going to be disturbing more trees. Take down more trees compared to where we have right now.
But
And as far as for the side distance, we have, I think, 175, which is a little bit about 200 short of what is required for I think 25 miles per hour speed. What I'm saying.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It doesn't look like to me that 34-inch sugar maple, the northernmost one, is really in the way of your driveway. Is there a particular reason why you need to take it down?
Just when let me just go. It's just a slope. When you cut
I see. There's no way to, I don't know construction much, but would there be some way to use some type of a berm or retaining wall instead of cutting back the slope like that?
Yeah, we can put retaining wall. We can put retaining wall here. That is,
Would that possibly allow the tree to be preserved if you did that?
yeah, we can do that. Instead of going at one, do the one slope, we can actually cut it down.
I don't, as I said, I don't know the practicality of such a thing. Yes, Mr. Carson?
Would a retaining wall interfere with the drivers being able to see out to the road, though?
What we should try to do, we instead of doing this right here, this what we have right now, we have, you see, if you look at here, it's about 8 feet away from the edge of the slope. So instead of going further away, we take off the retaining wall, so this is actually 9 feet of side distance. And we put actually to have side distance. But for the further away, taking the slope back, that's why we need the additional 8 feet. If we try to put the wall here, we don't have to go all the way back.
You'd still have the same sight line.
Side distance.
Okay.
But the slope is still going further away.
And is that something,
Problem is that when we bought this lot, this is my first time, we didn't know that.
I'm-
When the agent showed all this lot, we thought that it was already approved.
yeah,
We didn't know that all this is involved, This
I
is,
see.
That's why we didn't know. They said, okay, from my experience on most of that time, once a subdivision, a parcel of land have been approved by the planning board, I thought that was the end of it.
Yeah, you didn't know you'd have to have a
So-
special hearing for the
So I
trees,
didn't
did
know
you?
what's going through all this,
No, I understand.
And we went to design the safety system, do everything. We thought, well, that is the end of it.
Yep,
So we thought what we had to do just to do the engineering for the slope, meet the minimum requirement for the grade and so forth. And also, we thought everything was okay. But this is the other law, this wasn't being built. So we thought this was okay. But this, our driveway is far away from this drive.
yep.
So we thought that since this is okay, then this is far away.
Yeah, because the curve, it's a little different, huh? Okay.
So that is what we really.
Yes, Ms. Kruger?
I guess I have a slightly different take on the tree canopy on Leverett Road between Amherst and Leverett, having traveled this road many times a day for many years. I've watched this, since 1970, I've watched this canopy change, and a lot of trees along the canopy on the Leverett side as well have died or been replaced. There's been a lot of housing development on the Leverett side, so I'm not sure that I agree with the stark comparison about you're in Leverett, there's a scenic canopy and then a stark change when you get to Amherst. There's been a lot of development and a lot of change and tree change along this road over time. And I just want to speak, I like the possibility of sort of back parcel development or flag lot development with shared driveways. I think it's a good kind of development, so we don't just push everything onto road frontage. And so I see this as another one of those balancing acts between wanting to keep living things where they are and things the same, and allowing for the type of growth and development that we want to encourage. So somewhat inclined for myself to let those particular trees go, collect the money into the fund to do some replanting somewhere else, and let this move forward unless there's a real simple and sure solution. Maybe the retaining wall is one, but to get into redesigning where driveways go is beyond what I want to do in this meeting. I think we're talking about trees, and I wasn't overwhelmed by the importance of either of these trees, my layperson's viewpoint.
Thank you, Ms. Kruger. Yes, Mr. Snow?
And I agree. I think the shared driveway concept is an excellent idea. And that was the exact conversation we had with the lot listed here. Was that when that lot was developed, they were here in this room with a tree hearing, it was discussed that these other lots are going to get developed. And so this is a death of a scenic road, one driveway at a time, essentially. So if there is a way going forward in the future when we have lots available for sale on a scenic road, is there a way we can plan for these lots not to have multiple curb cuts on a scenic road and to do a shared driveway access point on a scenic road? That's not for this meeting, but it's a good conversation to have.
No, you make a very valid point, Mr. Snow. I mean, there's no reason that the common driveway that's being proposed today couldn't have served all 4 of these houses. Ms. Brestrup?
There are a couple of things about that. These lots are being sold individually. They're not being developed by one common developer. And the town has very little control over the development of frontage lots. So this idea was brought up initially, and we shared the idea with Mr. Johnson, who was representing the owner of the other lot to the north. And there was really no way at that point to get all of the people who were going to be developing these lots together to decide that this was going to be a shared driveway. So I'm just saying that in the case where all lots are developed by one developer, that's a very reasonable conversation to have, but where they're being developed individually, it's very difficult.
Yeah, I understand that.
So one thing you could consider is that the Zoning Board of Appeals is going to be looking at this plan, and they will be listening to whatever recommendations you have about the trees or about the location of the driveway. And they have not yet heard from the town engineer with regard to the site distance and how it could potentially be lessened. They haven't heard from the town engineer about the slopes that are required to driveway work. So I'm just suggesting that you might make a recommendation that is perhaps conditional, that if the driveway can be moved to the north and the tree is able to be saved, that you would prefer that option? Just offering that as a possibility.
I mean, it's a no-win situation for the trees, unfortunately. I mean, let's step aside for a moment and talk about the replacement. Presuming that these 2 trees were taken out, what would be the possibilities for requiring replacement of them?
We could set some species to be replanted there. If there is a way to, put on the property owner who purchased the property that they should maintain a naturalized buffer between X number of feet from the road, that would allow trees to regenerate naturally and maintain that, natural forest character, that would be a good thing to do. I don't know if we have the ability. But otherwise, require trees to be planted. The public way there is going to become very narrow because he has to cut back so far to maintain that line of sight. So that hill is being cut back to a point where there really is no longer a place to plant a public shade tree. The only place to put it is on private property.
Mr. Crowner?
Did the Public Shade Tree Committee weigh in on this? I'd like to hear what they had to say, if they had a recommendation.
We didn't get one.
Yeah, they voted on that yesterday, and their recommendation to the tree warden was to try to preserve the white pine and see if the driveway could be moved to the north.
Well, so it sounds like so I'm confused about which tree now is more important. The white pine is
You point-
perfectly healthy, you said.
Which one is the white pine?
On the
here?
left.
Oh, all the way on the left.
And so north is to the right-hand side of that diagram.
The white pine is to the south and the sugar maple is to the north. So I hear murmurings from the public. Is anyone here from the public here to speak about this? If you could, could you step aside and let this gentleman use the microphone, please?
My name's Scott Artisan. I'm a North Amherst resident, live in a lovely tree-lined block. I'm also a real estate professional in town. I do not know this gentleman. I know the proposed project. I've walked the site of the other house that's been put up there. I work with a lot of starting out families. In fact, I have clients that are looking, several clients looking right now that are starting families, looking to move to the area. There's a price point that's not being met for new families in town. And not to make it about dollars, but in a lot of ways, affordable, nice quality building would be fantastic, for our town. Too many of our homes have fallen into disrepair in the rental pool, and some people are unwilling to actually take on the challenge of revitalizing that.
So if you could focus your comments on the trees, please.
I certainly will. The cost of construction is challenging, the cost of excavation, clearing, engineering, all of that costs. Those costs are put down to the consumer side eventually. Driving up the costs minimizes the market that can be reached. I'm just putting, and I know that we're not talking about affordable housing here. What we're talking about is people who are professionals being able to buy a nice new home in a good town, on a beautiful block. That's all. So if a tree is sacrificed, it's a shame. They grow. White pines, I have so many white pines on my property. I mean, they just sprout all over the place. I'm not a tree expert, but they certainly are prolific on my property. They have a way of regenerating. And I think that if we think in terms of what use this will serve, it might help us. At least that would be my advice.
Thank you very much. Yes, Ms.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear here. You're saying that if we take the trees down, it's more cost-effective in the long run? Is that your opinion?
Yes. Anytime you have to re-engineer something, there's an intrinsic cost involved. Every time you go back to the drawing board, you're building front-end cost to something that then gets passed on at the back end. It's the nature of it. It's an unfortunate reality.
But you're talking about the engineering cost as opposed to the construction cost of taking that tree down and all the site clearing that needs to be done.
At the end of the day, it all gets factored into the same figure that they are trying to get.
Okay. Well, I agree with you in principle, but I'm having a hard time computing it, here, that, taking the tree down and that to move the driveway is just simply moving it out. It's not going to,
Well, look at what resources we're talking about tying up to it. The town engineer has to reevaluate what the sightline issues are. I mean, these
Right.
costs are, they're not just fixed on and I forget, Abbon, But the reality is any time that it comes before this, it increases the cost totally. It increases resources every time. You know, and I appreciate that we live in a beautiful, bucolic, wooded area. Like, I love that. I'm a North Amherst resident by choice. I didn't buy South Amherst, you know? Like, I bought North
Thank you.
Amherst.
Okay.
So there. Thanks.
Mr. Amwa?
If you look at it, I'm by profession civil
Use the mic, please.
By profession, I'm registered civil engineer, I also registered structural engineer. I'm doing this on my own. That's why I could afford to spend all the time on it. If I'm to hire somebody to actually do this, I don't think I will even still be trying to develop this lot. The reason why I'm still trying to do it because I'm doing it on my own. We do it on our own, which is no charge. As I said, I didn't know that I have to go through this. Initially, I thought when you have a subdivision like most of the time, that is it. So I just look at the slope. I said we'll be able to meet any minimum grade to bring a driveway and so forth. I didn't know, So what he's trying to say really, if I'm to put my time and the cost of the land, I don't think it really, based on how much we spent on it, septic system with the town, all type, I will also plan to trying to make the area actually plant some nice looking tree so that to make, I spoke, you remember what I told you, I said, we're ready to plant whatever tree or shrub they want us to plant to make it look nice like a scenic road.
Yeah.
It's part of,
Okay. All right. So, Ms. Brestrup, what are our options on this?
Well, I think that you, the planning board and the tree warden can try to come to some agreement about this. If you're not able to come to an agreement, I understand that this topic can go up to the select board. They have jurisdiction over public rights of way, and so they would make a final determination if you're not able to come to an agreement with the tree warden.
So, yes, Ms. Ford.
Can we ask the tree warden's recommendation? Would
Yes,
that be
I think he's
appropriate?
given it already, but we'd hear it
I'd
again.
like to hear it as how it would be framed, as a motion that we would approve or not approve.
As a motion. Well, I mean, I obviously would like to try to maintain the scenic character of the road. So that's what we're here to do. That's what the law is asking us to do. One way of doing that would try to preserve as many trees as possible. One way of doing that would be to move the road. I don't know how much is involved in moving that. And I can say that I'm not even sure, without looking at more details, if moving the road 10 feet, the common driveway, excuse me, would be far enough to really save the white pine. Because you still have to cut back quite a bit. So it may not even save the white pine at that point.
Mr. Crowner.
Last time we imposed a surcharge or something, and
Yeah.
so if the recommendation is going to allow this to go forward, I think we should do that again. And that is, if you're taking down, as I understand, if you're taking down a tree in the public way, you have to replace it. You have to provide replacement cost. And since this isn't a scenic road, I proposed last time that we put a surcharge on that. And I would propose that again. And since we're talking about a second set of trees, I would suggest that we go higher than we did last time, a little bit higher, because each loss is more dear.
Thank you, Mr. Crowner. Ms. Brestrup?
So the last time was in September of 2012, and at that time, the tree warden was recommending an inch per inch a fine, if you will, of $55. And I think his inch per inch amount is higher now. Perhaps you'd like to hear from him about that?
Yes, that's what I was asking about before.
So the 2013, I reassessed the replacement value per inch of tree, per inch diameter at breast height, 4.5 feet off the ground. And just to educate everybody in the room what the replacement value is about. This is an attempt to place a value on a public asset. Trees do many things. They're on scenic roads, they add the scenic character, but they also provide significant water, stormwater control, in the thousands of gallons every year. And I can go on and on. I won't bother right now. So we're losing this public asset for private gain. So I try to assess a value to replace that tree, the cost of purchasing a tree, essentially a 2-inch caliper tree, and then the cost of actually planting another 2-inch caliper tree, somewhere else around town. And that's what the $90 per inch is about, is how much it would cost me to buy a new tree and plant it somewhere else in town, so that we can have future trees. The intent, it's a dual intent, so we get money to buy new trees, so the taxpayers don't have to pay for it. But it also adds a cost. Historically, the cheapest thing to do is cut the tree down. There's no value to it. It's just a scraggly old tree. It doesn't mean anything. But the cost makes people think differently. They look at options, doing their project in a different way. And that's the real benefit of the inch per inch replacement cost, is to say, okay, how can I do this project and keep the tree and meet all of our goals? So that's the real intent of the cost. I'm not looking to penalize somebody for, because it's a scenic road or anything. I'm just trying to say, here's the real cost to put another tree in the ground.
So what are we talking about, a cost, 1-for-1, to replace these 2 trees? That's 58 inches total, if I'm adding correctly.
$5,000?
But $5,200.
Yes, Ms. Kruger.
On this point, I'm really glad we got the information that you have changed the fee schedule, or fines, what it's technically called, because I was really, after we voted last time for the surcharge, it was one of the few votes where I regretted my position afterwards. I would much rather have the fee or the fine reflect the cost and then apply it universally than decide case by case on a surcharge, what is more valuable or less valuable, or more scenic or less scenic. So I'm happy to hear that if we go with the new revised fee structure, it reflects a higher cost, or more the true replacement value, although you said it also reflects a sort of disincentive to cut, which is different than replacement cost. But I just wanted to say I would not support a surcharge concept, even though I did last time, because I've thought about it, and it's too arbitrary and not consistent.
I agree with Ms. Kruger. Mr. O'Keefe?
So our job here is to come to a mutually acceptable agreement with the tree warden and hopefully come up with a decision that we can both agree on. So I guess my question for Mr. Snow is, if the board were inclined to require that the applicant pay an inch per inch replacement according to your fee schedule, would that be something that you could support?
Yes.
Thank you. Any further comment, Mr. Crowner?
So yeah, I agree that it might tend toward arbitrariness, but what we have here is an opportunity to make a statement, to get some value from something that is not necessarily by right. I mean, he has to come for permission. So I think it's something that we need to take advantage of, because we're losing trees all over the place. The power company cut down all these trees and all these limbs. That's something that we couldn't prevent, but we're losing the resource that those provide. And so this is an opportunity to get some of that back. I think the price that what we were told last time, and I maybe it's not true anymore, but what we were told last time was the inch by inch is just replacing an established tree that provides X amount of benefit with a bunch of smaller trees that don't provide the same benefit for a long time. And so in the interim, we've lost something. So that's worth something to the town. That's worth something to all of us. And we have an opportunity to recoup some of that loss by getting more trees out of it. More than 1 inch per inch.
I disagree with you. This is a very steep fine at $5,000 to take down 2 trees, I'd say. And to go higher, I would be strongly opposed to going higher than that. Mr. Snow?
It's not a fine. It's a public asset. So if someone was building a house and they needed to take down, a street light, they would be charged to replace that street light.
Okay.
Whatever town infrastructure. This happens to be green infrastructure. And
So it's like replacing wetlands one place to another, right? Okay, I understand. I'm sorry I used the word fine. That was sloppy language on my part. Ms. Brestrup, did you have something?
Well, I wanted to say that I'm not sure that there is a mechanism by which the planning board can impose a surcharge. I understand that the decision that you came to last time was a decision that you came to with the tree warden, who was then charging an inch per inch cost of $55. So you were within his sort of traditional or typical way of dealing with the issue at that time. And so I think I would recommend that you stay within his typical way of dealing with it this time if you agree that the tree can come down, that you go along with his fee structure that he's established. And he uses this not only for scenic roads, but he uses it for other times when public trees need to be taken down as well. So I guess I'm discouraging you from considering the option of imposing a surcharge over and above what the tree warden is proposing.
Thank you, Ms. Brestrup. All right, I think we've heard enough on this subject, so if somebody wants to make a motion to, I guess we have to close the public hearing before we vote.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? All right, do we have a motion on the trees? Ms. Kruger?
I move that the, I'm not exactly sure where we all fell on this one, that I think we had a somewhat tacit agreement. I would move that we approve the removal of the 2 trees as proposed by the applicant, the 24-inch white pine and the 34-inch sugar maple, and have the tree warden apply the replacement value cost according to his fee schedule. Does that capture what we partly, that's my
Second.
motion. Okay.
Moved and seconded.
Wait, can I have clarification? Are you
Mr.
saying,
Carson?
are you saying then he would have to pay the $5,000 fine? Or fee?
Replacement cost.
Replacement cost.
Yeah, I don't think we actually have a choice. I think that's the outcome of allowing the 2 trees to come down. Am I correct? Right.
Ms. Anderson?
I have a question, maybe for the tree warden. Is it possible, in lieu of paying the restoration fee, of asking the applicant to replace the trees in kind at a certain size that's sensible? I mean, you're not going to replace a 34-inch tree in lieu of the, it's not a fine, whatever it is.
It's a replacement, inch-per-inch replacement cost.
Replacement cost.
So, I mean, as far as planting more trees there right now, it's, there's quite a bit of tree cover there right now.
All right.
So, once he's finished with his road project and excavation and cutting the side back, I would have to assess the situation and see what happens with the new property owners and whether they decide to cut all the trees down up to the road and put in a nice green lawn, and see whether it's worth planting trees there then. So I would actually prefer just to have the money available to me to plant the trees where I feel they should go, and plant the biggest trees possible at that point. I don't really see an advantage to requesting them to plant a tree at this stage.
Thank you. Good question. Any further discussion? All right, so we have Ms. Kruger's motion. All in favor?
Was there a second?
Yes. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor. Opposed? It's 3, and abstentions? All right, that motion passes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Amoy. Thank you, Mr. Snow, for coming in.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to see you. We are? Okay. This next public hearing is going to be very fast, so don't blink or you'll miss it. In accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A, these public hearings have been duly advertised and notice has been posted in the town hall and sent to abutters. The hearings are being held to provide opportunity for interested citizens to be informed about and to comment on the proposed site plans. SPR 2013-00009 M16948, 417 West Street, brought by Ronald Laverdier, requesting site plan review approval for Phase 2 Amherst Office Park construction of a mixed-use 3-story wood frame office and apartment building with 10,928 square feet on each floor, offices on the first floor and 12 apartments, 6 on each of the second and third floors. Map 19D, Parcel 2, BVC FPC zoning district. We've received a letter from Mr. Laverdier dated April 5th, 2013, stating, "Dear Planning Board, we respectfully request a continuation of the April 17th, 2013 public hearing for the 417 West Street project and ask that it be moved to June 5th, 2013. Sincerely, Ronald Laverdier." Is there any public comment or questions from the board on this? I would ask that the be a motion to continue the public hearing to June 5th, 2013.
So moved.
Any
I'll
further,
second.
further discussion?
We need to close the public hearing first?
We're continuing. it.
Continue.
Oh, we're continuing it, sorry. Yeah.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, Mr. Rosnoy. That's unanimous, I believe. Were there any opposed or abstentions? No. Okay, thank you, everyone. All right, we're not running too late on our next public hearing, which is SPR 2013-00010. This is the Unitarian Society. Sorry, 00010 M17206. This is 121 North Pleasant Street, Unitarian Universalist Society of Amherst, requesting site plan approval for the construction of a 2,844 square foot addition on the east side of the current building, and includes reducing and repaving the existing parking lot on the east side of the building and improvements along Boltwood Walk. Map 11C, parcel 288, bless you, PG zoning district. So, is Mr. Ross? Oh, thank you. Mr. Rosnoy is recusing himself on this hearing as well. So if the applicant could come forward to the microphone and tell us what you have planned, we're looking forward to hearing about it.
Where is the record to present the board from?
The place that Mr. Amua had it sitting right next to the front table, I think was working pretty well so that the whole board could see it. Does that need to be further back for you, Mr. Schreiber?
That's good. That's good. That's perfect.
Thank you. Yes,
Oh, hi.
tell us who you are.
My name's Carolyn Cave. I'm the president of the Board of Trustees of the UU Society of Amherst, and I don't plan to say very much. I'm going to hand it over to these professionals here in a second. Jonathan Salvon, our architect, and Peter Wells, landscape architect. But I just want to say a few words, just scene setting, and I know you know them, but I'll try to be brief. The Unitarian Universalist Society of Amherst has been a vital part of the downtown community since 1893, contributing to the well-being of Amherst in any number of ways that I won't elaborate. The congregation chose to continue our positive presence in downtown Amherst rather than seek a new site outside of downtown because we're quite committed to downtown Amherst. Our building, as you know, has not been significantly altered in nearly 90 years, and yet it is still serving a public function. But to retain our vitality, to grow, and we are growing, and to continue our tradition in and service to this community, we need to expand our building. And it would mean an investment of just over $2 million in downtown Amherst. The expansion does mean using the property that we own behind our present building, but we do plan to leave 5 parking spaces at the conclusion of construction, and they'll be talking more about this. So our goal, our dream, I shall say, is to have a building that's functional, accessible, energy efficient, and aesthetically consonant with our historic building. And I think that our plans do achieve those goals, making a building that will serve our congregation well and support our growth and vitality, and will also provide accessible rental spaces for groups in downtown, including performance space in our historic sanctuary, social space, and meeting rooms. And I think that our architect and landscape architect can answer specific plan questions better than I, but I will also be happy to answer any questions that you have about the society or any other questions that you think are appropriately directed to me. And I'll hand it over to Peter and Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cabe.
Once again, my name is Peter Wells. I'm a landscape architect with the Berkshire Design Group. We were responsible for the survey, site planning, and engineering for the project. We've been involved in it for a number of years, going through the feasibility phase option on whether or not we're going to leave town or stay in town. I'm going to briefly talk a little bit about the site itself. I know most of you are familiar with it, but for those of you that are not, it's a fairly small site. It's less than 1/3 of an acre. It's roughly 65 feet wide by close to 200 feet deep. There's a grade change from North Pleasant Street back to the lot next to Rayo's of approximately 8 feet. So thereby, it's a suitable site for a walkout, if you will. We have sewer, water, gas, electric all available. There's an existing 14-lot parking area in the rear that we are going to take over 9 of those spaces for the building addition and retain 5. The majority of the site is impervious. There are planting areas around the existing building now, but the majority is either building or pavement. There are 4 large pin oaks along Kellogg Ave, and there's 5 locust trees in the alleyway that 4 of them are owned. Well, the alleyway has an easement, and there's 4 trees in that, and there's 1 tree toward the rear of the site that is also a locust on our property. We have more than enough aerials and photographs for reference if there are any questions. Are we being taped, or can I just stand up and?
Yes, you're on live television.
You can take the mic with you.
You can take it right off the stand.
Thank you. As I mentioned, the addition is 2,844 square feet. This is a board that I'll get into a little bit later. We presented this last night at a tree committee hearing with regard to one of the oaks that we are going to try and save, but I'll get into that in a few minutes. This is a site plan showing the proposed addition, North Pleasant, Kellogg Kellogg Ave, the existing building as it sits now, and this is the proposed addition. Jonathan Sullivan from Kuhn Riddle will get into the details with regard to the architectural elements of that. But I'd just like to walk you through the site in terms of what proposed improvements we are planning from a site standpoint. We are planning a new entrance to the building located on the pedestrian-friendly alleyway. We are proposing precast concrete pavers formed in various shapes, colors, and styles as the Tiffany that's in the window. So the top part of the Tiffany, we've replicated in a paving pattern that mimics that style and design and reflects something from the building coming out. Adjacent to the pavers itself, we have other precast pavers that will be set in sand, so it will be somewhat pervious for the trees that are located throughout. This walkway would meander around, and at this point, it becomes a poured-in-place concrete sidewalk that is accessible and would access the lower level of the proposed addition. Handicap accessibility from the existing walkway on Kellogg Ave on through and into the lower portion of our building. We have proposed also, our planting plan is limited at this point. We have proposed a 3.5-inch cornice kusa to take the place of the Zelkova that exists there now, that is in disrepair and probably will come down sometime soon. So we are going to take that down and plant a rather large, nice focal tree that would be housed in the existing concrete planter. We've provided planters throughout the project that will be prepped by the contractor in terms of topsoil, mulch, etc., but will be planted by the congregation in terms of plant material itself. We have recommended a number of native plants for the planting, and they would include everything from andromedas to azaleas, rhododendrons, mountain laurel, native perennials, and ground cover. They are going to use this as a learning tool with regard to including the kids in a children's garden area within some of the planters. So we're going to help them out with regard to the actual design, but that will come at a later date. We are proposing no additional signage. We are going to use the existing sign that is there now. We have requested certain waivers, traffic impact. We feel traffic will be reduced since we are reducing the amount of pavement and parking in the rear and providing a much easier and accessible parking area. Driving in off the Kellogg, you basically park and drive out. We are providing an additional small ramp here that will both double as a back-out area, but also create a ramp so that service trucks and safety vehicles can access the Boltwood Walk area. We also asked for a waiver for the erosion control plan. Since the site is 90% impervious, we're going to be doing some excavation for foundations for the new addition, but that will be a controlled excavation. Most of the soil coming out of there for the foundations and the lower floor will be carted off-site. There is a catch basin at the low end of the site that we will have a silt sock put in there to catch any sediment that is leaving the site itself. The access point here is a high point in terms of a berm along here, so water does not leave the site. So we will catch it in here and have a silt sack that can be maintained by the contractor. Overall, I think lighting. There are 3 existing decorative lights in the pedestrian-friendly alleyway. There are 2 out on North Pleasant Street. We are planning on retaining those. We will have more light within the outside areas on this project because we are taking down the crabapple trees that are located at our entrance. There's roughly 6 of them there, and they're intermingled with the lights themselves. You don't even know that there are 2 lights within the locust trees until you walk it and really look for it. So I think there'll be more light here. There is a light, some Cobra heads on Kellogg Ave, and there is a spotlight off of a pole that shines down into the entrance to Rayo's. So lighting, we didn't feel we needed additional lighting. There will be lighting off of the new entranceways also for easy access for pedestrians. So that's our lighting concept. Overall, we feel that the space between our abutting property, Barry Roberts' property, and ours is going to be greatly improved with a pedestrian-friendly environment. We have created areas for potential benches to be installed. We've shown them here, but listed them by others. Because of our budget being so tight, we wanted to create an area and perhaps work with the town on installing and adding benches there at some future date or during this project. So there is a home for benches that are nicely installed around the planting areas, but not part of, at least buying the benches aren't part of this project. Overall, that's it from the site standpoint. I think it's a very nice design. It's a good infill design. We still have easy access and pedestrian movement through the site itself. And I think actually much safer than what's there now with the configuration of that existing parking lot. In terms of the tree, we did meet with the tree committee hearing yesterday at length. And our approach now is going to be to attempt to try and save the 36-inch pin oak, which is in close proximity to the foundation being built. And in doing so, we brainstormed yesterday, and we're going to do some site investigative work with what's called an air spade. An air spade is a compressed air gun that actually digs trenches by pushing the earth out and not injuring the roots. And we're going to do that in the area that we are planning on putting the foundation to determine what structural roots are there and might be injured from this development. Or if there are structural roots there that could be worked with so that we can keep them and possibly save the tree. So it's investigative work to determine where these structural roots are, and we're going to do that prior to actually building, probably within the next month or so, and Alan Snow is going to work closely with us during that process to actually look at it. I do have a photograph showing you what the trench would look like. It's basically a 1.5 foot wide trench. They blow the earth out of it. They blow it out, but they blow it into a vacuum that's right there. So there's no clouds of dust going everywhere. Exposes all the roots, so Alan can analyze what's there and whether or not the tree can be saved or not. So I think it's a great approach. It works on both sides, and that's what we'll be doing with that tree. The other tree that is the larger oak at the entranceway located here is slated to be removed anyway by the town. So that's not even in the picture. So this is the tree in question that we're going to be doing the root investigative work on. So with that, I'd like to pass it over to Jonathan to talk a little bit more about the bulk of this project, which is the architectural element in terms of the building itself.
Did you have a quick question, Ms.
It was
Anderson?
since you were talking about the site plan and the site work,
Yes.
would this be the time to talk about the oil tank? Or later?
I believe
Or how that will, might impact?
Mr. Roberts is here and could probably answer those questions.
Well, let's let them get
Yeah.
through their presentation, Ms. Anderson, then we'll get to questions. Thank you, Mr. Wells. Mr. Sullivan.
Good evening. Just to repeat, my name is Jonathan Salva. I'm with Kuhn Riddle Architects, and I'm going to present the architectural plan. The site is quite constrained and it's architecturally challenging. The existing building, which is here on this level, which is the upper level, and here on the lower level, is about 3,000 square feet. We're just about doubling the size of the building at the main level. And one of the big challenges is accessibility. There's no real accessibility into most of the building today. There is a ramp that takes you into the back and into the lower level, but not, and there is a ramp, a wooden ramp that takes you up to the upper level, but you can't connect internally between the two levels, and there's a lot of limitations inside the space. So, as Peter alluded to, one of our primary tasks was creating a new ramp at the southwest corner of the site. That, just for a little additional clarification, the property line is right here, right along the face of that ramp and along the face of our addition. This part of the addition is at 0 feet from the lot line. This piece will be at 10 feet back. And this will gain us a new entry into a new entry lobby, a new elevator that'll serve both levels, a new fire stair. The sanctuary will be primarily left as is, with the exception of a little bit of painting and the ability to use a back and front elevator to gain access to the chancel space. There'll be a new 100 seats social hall with either a kitchen or a kitchenette, depending on how the budget comes out in the end. New accessible toilets at this level. At the lower level, the addition is primarily a classroom and office addition, but will also have its own accessible entrance directly off the parking lot at the northeast corner. At this point here, covered porch, another covered porch at the upper level. Some renovations, mostly around accessibility and sort of mechanical and electrical upgrades in the existing building. From the exterior, we're trying to work with the aesthetic of the existing building. This is the elevation that most folks know on North Pleasant Street. That just as some folks probably know, the Tiffany window will be restored as part of this project, whereas a separate project parallel to this project will be removed during the time of construction. Our new entry is here. And again, here on the south side, that's the new entry addition. The social spaces at the back. This is the east facade that would face the coffee shop. This is the north face that faces Kellogg Street. That's our kitchenette or kitchen addition. That's the new covered entry porch at the lower level. We're trying to work with the materials that are there. We're not going to use exactly the same siding material. We're going to use a wide plank cement board siding that matches the width and character of the existing striated cedar siding. The whole building will be re-roofed. We still are some ways from knowing what the colors of the building will be. I'm sure there'll be a committee that will work with me to figure out that. And then a couple of 3D views. That's the new view or proposed view from North Pleasant Street, our new ramp and sloped walkway. Trying to leave the existing front alone and not make any alterations to the historic front. We are in the process of hearing back from the Architectural Access Board in Boston regarding a variance to not put a ramp to this entrance. New view at the back, our new accessible entrance at the lower level, and a couple of existing views if we need to come back to them. So that's the quick overview of the architectural side of it. I don't know if folks want to start with questions on the architectural side or circle back, but.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Sullivan. Well, we already have one question, so let's hear again, Ms. Anderson, what your question was.
Yes, well, at the site inspection, when we were there, we learned of the existence of a neighboring property, a budding property, that there's an underground tank that, and that there will need to be removed in soil remediation. That will have an impact yet unknown on the project, and I thought maybe the rest of the board might want to hear about that, since it will affect the site as much as you know anyway.
First off, where the oil tank is not on our property.
Right.
We've been working with Mr. Roberts with regard to that issue. And the question was, what's the status on the oil tank and the possibility of losing trees in that area?
We've been working with the LSPs from the Unitarian Society and my own LSPs in DEP, and we're under an order of DEP to mitigate the oil that was from the oil tank before we bought the building, and it was discovered when these folks were doing borings for their foundations. So we've come up with a plan that's been filed with DEP, which shows a work area that goes, if you're familiar with the 103 Shops building, it goes from the steps that enter midway on the walkway. You got a picture there, Jonathan? Yeah.
I think this is relatively accurate.
Yeah, and the oil tank is from these stairs going back towards the east, and it's partially, we believe, partially under this walkway. So the tank, we won't know whether the tank comes out or if it gets closed in place until we excavate. But we do know that from doing our test wells, that the oil, it shows up in the borings in a kind of an area like this. Nothing coming down this way, but mostly going almost towards the door of the lower level of the church as it exists now. And that layer of oil is down at approximately 15 feet. So that means that we will have to remove all the overburden to get down to 15 feet. And of course, that's where the groundwater is. So we will be bringing in a fractionalization tank to recover the oil and water and separate it, and excavating down and removing the contaminated soil and taking that to a licensed place in Chicopee to dispose of it. It will probably mean that these two trees here, at the minimum, will be lost during that work. And the sidewalk, obviously, will be removed and then replaced after. So that's our plan. Our plan is to start before these folks get started, obviously, and we've scheduled right now to do preliminary work, fencing, et cetera, on May 1st, and start the construction on May 6th. Hopefully take less than a week, but weather is going to play a big factor because we're working in oily water, and we can't work if it's pouring rain. So, does that answer your question?
Very much, thank you.
Thank you. So I'll just step in for a second and say that there was a site visit. The planning board visited the site and had some questions. I'm just going to assume that everyone here is familiar with the building and the site, because it's really at the, if it's not at the dead center of Amherst, it's pretty close. The first question was, will the overhead wires on the north side of the church that connect the church to the public utilities be removed?
The poles will remain. our service will be coming underground from one of the existing poles. So the dangling wire that kind of grazes the tree, that will go away.
Thank you. Some of these have already been addressed. How will storage of materials be handled during construction?
I would expect that given the incredibly tight site, there will be no storage, certainly not a lot of soil storage on site, because there simply isn't room, but, you know, to fit in the construction vehicles and do the excavation that's needed. What comes out of the ground will have to basically leave that day.
Are you taking over the whole parking lot for the duration of?
Yeah, the whole parking lot, and the part of the front plaza might get used for lay-down area as well. I mean, it's urban construction.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Ford.
One of the questions that came up during design review board was any proposed screening that you might be presenting for the condensers along the north edge there. Is there anything being proposed there?
That's a good question. I think we actually like a little input. We are of two minds. One is it'd be nice not to see the condensers, but we're also a little nervous about putting up a fence that would be secure enough that people wouldn't get behind it and have this little dark spot in the middle of center town where you know, mischief can happen. So I don't think we're necessarily committed one way or the other on that topic.
Is there room for plantings? I don't know what,
There's only
it's a
few
question.
feet, and plantings would require quite a bit of digging, and that's in the root zone of this tree that we're trying
Yeah,
to save.
okay.
And frankly, in the root zone of the next tree up.
Yeah,
So.
one that's existing.
So just for so just so I understand, there's going to be air conditioning condensers installed along the Kellogg Avenue side of the building?
We're actually already there.
So they're in that recessed area there?
There's an existing exit door, and it's sort of, if you know that little doghouse bump on the north side, it's between there and the end of the building.
I see. Did that answer your question, Ms. Ford?
Well, yeah, but there's clearly no solution, proposed, so we're going to have to decide, I mean, if it's a low, I mean, I think there are screening options. Think we'd have to, I would be interested in seeing a proposal or something being proposed there. And certainly not something that's 8 feet high. I mean, I appreciate that you don't want something that someone can get behind, but I guess the question would be what's the minimum distance between the condenser and some sort of screening material that's required, and then really what could get behind there realistically if you had something that's 3 or 4 feet high.
And you certainly want 3 or 4 feet between whatever sort of screen you put up and the condensers, just for good airflow.
So if you had something that was only 3 or 4 feet high,
Like a little low.
something low, yeah.
We do have about 6 feet of area between the condenser. The condenser itself needs some breathing room, so we're considering
Right.
plant material. So
There is also a transformer sitting next to it. That's not necessarily reflected in this particular section.
So, I'm inclined to, or I would be willing to leave this open and somehow have it be a condition in whatever we end up crafting, saying that maybe it's something that comes back once the condensers are in place, and, everybody can actually see, kind of like we did with the shutters, can actually see what the situation is, and
Oh, the shutters.
make some proposals at that time. But I think it should stay open and be addressed at some point.
Thank you, Ms. Ford.
David?
Yes, Mr. Carson.
How large are the condensers? How tall are they?
Typical sort of 3 by 3 by 3 kind of cube.
Okay.
They might be 3 by 3 by 3'6" high, because I think they might be on a little pad.
And how many altogether?
I think there are 6 of them.
6 all in a row, or 6, 3, and 3?
mechanical plan, which I have to admit we didn't bring to confirm it. They could be in either, I suspect it could be in either configuration, but the piece that's making me a little bit nervous about saying categorically that they're in a row is the transformer location.
I agree with you in that I think even if it's a low screening or a low fence behind which no mischief could take place, that it would at least deter the look of seeing the entire condenser. And if it was even a lattice or something to that effect, I mean, your call, but, you know, you get the airflow that condensers require and such, or, you know, that can pop up out of the ground so they can be serviced, something to that effect.
I'm sensing a lot of support for the idea of trying to screen those in some way, so I think that's probably going to end up being a part of this. Continuing with the questions that came up at the site plan, or site visit rather. Will the town be able to lease the remaining parking spaces from the church when all is said and done?
I think I might like Carolyn to chime in here a little bit about that.
So we fully intend for that to be the case. The board of the UU is working on what, you know, what kind of arrangement we want to propose back to the town. And quite frankly, we've been so incredibly busy with getting this off the ground that we've sort of, we keep tabling our discussion of the lease. But we absolutely will have an arrangement back with the town before the end of our construction period.
Okay, because I guess the issue being, one of the issues being that because you're in the municipal parking district and asking for a waiver from the parking requirements, that those 5 spaces take on an enhanced importance as to how they normally would. So.
We're keenly aware of how important every parking place is in downtown Amherst, so. Yeah.
Yes, Ms. Anderson.
Yeah, speaking of parking, after I left the site visit, I was thinking about contractor parking, and let me just back up and say I think this is a wonderful project, by the way. I think it's exciting for Amherst. It's a classic example of infill, and it's, you know, all those good reasons. And, you know, I also sit on the CPAC committee, which gave you the money to restore the windows, so all good. So the question about parking, I mean, we've already talked about the how tight the space is, and I talked about the work limit line, that you'll have a construction fence for safety certainly set up around this, and that there's no laydown, almost virtually no laydown area, which is a term for building materials. When they get delivered, maybe they don't go in that day, they go in tomorrow. Where do you put them? My experience at UMass has been that when we've had projects like this, that when it comes to contractor parking, because again, parking is so sensitive, even though it's your parking lot, most people in town, I didn't know that it was belonged to the UU, and had an arrangement with the town to let the town use it with metered parking spaces. The contractor parking, they come all day, they park from 7 to 3, 8 to 4, and I don't know whether it's in our purview to talk about contractor parking during the scope of while the work is ongoing, but what is the plan for the contractors to park? Are you going to require them to park off-site, or commandeer a spot for them in an underused place on town, or make them use the garage if they can find it? I know, I shouldn't talk like that. To me, garages go up in the air. This one happens to go underground. So I guess my concern is contractor parking during the project itself. And I don't know whether that's in our purview. I look at the planning board.
Ms. Brestro.
I know in the past on projects like the Lord Jeff and the Boltwood Place, the applicant worked out contractor parking with the select board, and often the select board would designate certain spaces for contractor parking or for trailers or something like that, and dedicate those spaces to the applicant during the construction period. So that might be an option for them to speak with the select board about that.
And I believe the construction manager that we were working with has already begun that conversation. I don't know if they've contacted the select board or if they've just started off with the parking enforcement folks, but our contractor will be Wright Builders, and they're keenly aware of both the issue of not having any lay down area and the challenge of finding parking for their own folks. And have a feeling there's going to be a fair bit of carpooling before this is all done too. But it is something that they're working through as part of their due diligence on this project.
Well, that being said, my experience is that contractors and the subcontractors like to be near their trucks.
They do, and
They don't like to go far.
Yeah.
They want to be near those trucks. That's where the tools are. That's, back and forth, back and forth. So, moving the contractor vehicles a great distance isn't practical, really, because it's downtime. But I don't know whether that's a condition or whether something, just a recommendation, that the select board look at the parking during the construction.
I don't necessarily see that we need to do that, Ms. Anderson. I mean, in my mind, our site plan review is, we do consider certain construction issues like runoff during construction.
Right.
But I don't think we can, we could certainly make that suggestion, but I think that where they park is beyond the scope of our site plan
Okay.
review. Would be my take on it. Ms. Kruger?
I don't want to interrupt your list
Oh.
If you were done, because I had some other things to add as questions.
I think we'll come back around to this last one, so go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yep.
I wave to your.
Lighting plan. There was a question about whether a lighting plan would be submitted, and if there was a need for more exterior lighting around the church, and we've now heard that there is a dark and mysterious alcove on the Kellogg side of this, and the darkness concerns me when we don't have a lighting plan.
I'm concerned if it's dark if we put up a tall fence.
Oh.
There is, in fact, lighting along Kellogg, and if we put up a tall fence, then we create a shadow. We are also providing the code-required egress lighting. For a second, I'm just going to walk you quickly through that. At each of the exits, entrances, we have to provide lighting. There is some lighting today, but since we're doing a general upgrade to the electrical system, what existing exterior lighting there is, we're replacing. So there'll be lighting at the existing front porch. There'll be new lighting under our covered entry here, as well as some wall sconces along the wall and some step lights in the ramp so that that's safely lit. There'll be a wall pack at this exit door, emergency exit door. There'll be can lights underneath the porches. So all the egress lighting that we're obligated to provide by code will also be there.
What's a pack light?
It's a simple sort of low-profile wall washing type light fixture, as opposed to a recessed light fixture or a sconce, a ductile.
So about the posts that are those on your site, the light posts, or are those Town of Amherst light
I don't
posts?
believe any of the site lights on our property.
Three of the decorative lights.
Microphone, sorry, Peter.
Three of the decorative lights in the pedestrian alleyway are on Barry Roberts' property. That's the property that has the easement. The town installed those back in the 70s along with the pavers. Then there's two lights off of North Pleasant Street that are on town property. And then there's the Cobras down Kellogg Ave. And then this pole right here has a floodlight that shines back here.
Excuse me, Peter, what are the ones that you put by the post office on the other side? What are those?
Cobra heads, street lights.
Oh, those are streetlights,
Yeah.
okay. So it is pretty well lit then. Where's the concern on Kellogg? That there's
Well, my concern would be if we put up a tall fence, then we're creating a shadow.
Yeah, we're not gonna do a tall fence, yeah, but there is continuous lighting along Kellogg Street, yeah.
No. Well, I was hoping we might be able to replace some of those glass tops on the streetlights that cause so much glare downtown with downcast lighting, but
Yeah.
they're not on your site, so
After
we
we
can make you
get the
do
back
that.
parking lot replaced.
Yeah, right.
So, more question on lighting. Yes, Mr. Carson?
Yeah, I just want to ask more question about the lighting. Would the egress lighting be used even when the church is not open at night? Would it be on 24 hours a day on the porches?
Wouldn't necessarily have to be. If there's concern about light pollution, those can be set on timers. At least I believe, and I'm not the electrical engineer here, it's my understanding that you can put those on a timer when something's entirely closed down.
I was thinking it would be more helpful for safety reasons to keep them on during the
them on.
night. Yeah, for myself.
Yeah.
Just curious, a lot of times we will ask for cut sheets of the lighting that you're actually going to use, and in lieu of that, a condition that it all be dark sky compliant. I think if is anyone on the board interested in seeing the fixtures they're going to use? They all seem pretty unobtrusive or recessed, the ones they're using.
I did actually bring some copies of the cuts if folks are curious. They are all downcast. They're either fluorescent or LED, and we're trying to keep them as much LED as we can. So we're certainly comfortable with you adding a condition like that or taking a look at the cuts, whatever is your desire.
Well, maybe you could pass them around just
Sure.
in case anybody wants to see, since you have them. Ms. Kruger?
Well, let me start with lighting, and I just had a short list of a few of my concerns, and I also I'm generally supportive of this project, and I think it's good for the town and good for the downtown. And that being said, I was thinking of consistency, and we've asked pretty much all of our other applicants for cut sheets or tear sheets on the lighting, so I would ask for that. Just, pretending I didn't like this project, what would I be asking for, and just to, be consistent. And then the planting plan, I know, Mr. Wells, you rattled off species, but for the planting beds, we don't have a planting plan, and I know there's the desire to have young people in the congregation involved, but that doesn't necessarily tell us what the plan is, so maybe that's changed, or I misunderstood, so.
We actually don't have a planting plan developed. What we envision in happening is giving this list of native plants, and they're welcome to come up with additional ones. A lot of the plants might be donated from different households throughout the congregation versus taking a plan and going and buying it from a nursery. Perennials also might be, but what I was going to offer to the congregation was that I could, once I get a list on what was available in terms of species, sizes, et cetera, that I felt could be transplanted, I could come up with a planting plan to place them in certain areas that would work, and
So that's
submit that if you want.
That's more of a comfort level for me, just because of other concerns and also wanting to be consistent with other applicants. So it could be a condition that come in later and that staff could approve that, but to have that on file.
I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but they don't want just bare beds.
I know, and it might not
saying-
happen right at the end of termination, but of the construction. But I have the planting plan, and then bike racks, and I think it was in our development report that there weren't any bike racks located here, and it just seems that this would be a site where we would want that, or at least for the board to discuss if we want that. And then my last one is I am concerned about the benches, that they're omitted, and they're shown but omitted from your plan, and with the idea that this might be a public contribution. So I have trouble reviewing and approving something of this scope in this location without some amount of public seating or a site plan that includes some benches. Got 100 seats in the social hall, but no seating outside in the more publicly used space. So I have a concern about benches, bike racks, planning plan, and I think the lighting concern has maybe been answered by what you submitted. I don't really have time to look at it, but so that's kind of those are my concerns.
Did you want to address any of those?
Not at this point, I don't think.
Okay. The ones that I picked up on were the planting plan and the bike rack.
Benches?
And the benches. So we'll come back. Right. Just kind of keep track.
Although I would like to comment that the alleyway that we did propose those is owned by Mr. Roberts. He was generous enough to work with us, and I'm not sure if he's seen all the plans in detail, but we are working on his land, and we would have to run things by him with any type of improvement to that area. And it's an area now that basically doesn't have any seating, and we are proposing some. That's why I thought we could work with the town.
So, just so I'm clear, so the sketched out area for the benches is not on the church's property, but on Mr. Roberts' property, but you were doing some site planning for that
Yeah.
area?
Right here. And we know we're going to have some site disturbances in some areas, and so we're going to have to do some form of restoration. But the details of this really need to be worked out with Mr. Roberts as it is in his plan.
I have a question on the lighting, and I'm fully aware that not all of you have seen these pictures yet, but there's a couple of them that in here that I just wanted to ask about. And the first one is, it's called a Hanover lantern, and it's sort of a post lantern. You probably can't see it.
Well, there's two options there. We're looking at a very basic sconce, or perhaps something a little bit more historically accurate to the period. The challenge is we have a lovely arts and crafts style building, and it's difficult to get gracious commercial grade sconce lighting. So what that fixture is exactly is still a little open. But we'll try to get something that's both resistant to vandalism and shines light predominantly downward at that location. So it's either going to be something with a shield over the top, or something that's a little bit more traditional, but with a cut-off screen inside the glass.
I see. And then you have a designer floodlight. Is that the one up in the corner of the park?
We place it in our cost pricing so that we'd have sort of a stand-in. I don't know that we need it. We've gone back and forth with whether or not we think we need some additional lighting on the building at the back. So we wanted to sort of own something in our bid pricing with our contractors. Whether we actually need that light fixture is an open question.
So I'll just say right now that I'm in favor of requiring a lighting plan for the site. There's enough questions here that I feel like we need some type of at least rudimentary mapping of what's going to be where, beyond what we've got in my mind. Other people may disagree. That's just my.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
Although we're not proposing any site lighting because it exists there now, so you want us to develop a photometric plan of the existing town lighting?
No. The lights that you're going to use on the outside of the building, that are going to be in public view, we'd like to know what they're going to be.
Okay.
I mean, we run in, I mean, this is something that we do as a matter of routine on all site plan reviews. And Ms. Brestrup?
So are you asking for a plan that shows the location of the lights and then accompanying information to say what those lights are?
Yes.
Or are you asking for a photometric plan?
I don't necessarily think a photometric plan is what I'm asking for. I'm sorry if I lack that. I don't have your technical knowledge of what these things are, but I mean, frankly, my real concern is that the downtown has got enough glare already from the bad design of the public streetlights to avoid exacerbating it by additional private lighting. That's really what I'm concerned about.
Okay, thank you.
What I guess I would like to add is that, I mean, most of what we're doing is, with the exception of that questionable floodlight, whether we need it or not, is the code minimum. All the lighting at the entrances, we can't really step down from where we are to meet the building code. So if you ask us to submit it, we will submit it, but I don't think there's an opportunity to sort of reduce the wattage from the point.
That wasn't really what I was I mean,
Yeah, if anything,
that's not really what I guess I'm not expressing myself very well. I'm so sorry. I'm really just trying to get at that the lighting's important. And, I mean, we have a problem right here in the town hall that we can't get resolved, which is the parking meter on the back of the building. You can't see it at night, and it's a matter of a very small light in a particular location, and we can't get it. And so it's kind of a touchy subject.
I think it's actually it's actually the opposite, that if we were going to ask for photometrics, it would be to ensure that there would be enough light around the, in the public areas where people are going to be in the evening. So,
What do you think?
well, now we've opened up that can of worms. If you're going to, if you're going to do if you're going to do a lighting plan, basically it's just drawing a circle of where how much of the ground is going to be covered by that light. I think we might as well ask for it. That would be my recommendation at this point.
Any thoughts from anyone else on the board? Mr. Carson?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also, if there is a light in the back of the building, then the spotlight, is it the town that has the spotlight now? I mean, maybe that could eventually be removed then, if it's not needed, if there's a light in the back of your property. I'm sure that would probably be a lot more attractive, and it would be shining on the sidewalk behind your building.
So I guess we're back to doing a photometric plan for the town's lights? That's what I thought.
Well, we can only require you to do a photometric plan on my understanding, on your own property and wherever your lights are going to shine onto somebody else's property.
Right.
Yeah.
Any lights that are coming from somewhere else, they can affect the total lumens on any portion of your property, but we can't tell you what to do about it. Is that more or less accurate? Just give us something.
You know what to do.
More questions? Mr. O'Keefe?
Are we done with the lighting?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I wanted to come back to the bike racks. I'm not sure where that ended up. Was that on your list, Mr. Chair, to come back to?
It
or
is.
did we skip over that?
Yep, it's on the list to come back to. Go ahead.
So I would encourage the applicant to consider that in their site plans. We're talking about substantial expansion to the holding capacity of this building in a property that's already parking constrained and is resulting in a net loss of parking downtown, and presumably you would want to encourage people visiting the building to use alternative means of transportation.
Sure.
So I think it would be very helpful. I mean, I'm aware that there's some bicycle parking in place around the perimeter of the property, but it's, already well used, and
Yeah.
we're talking about expanding the capacity of the site, so I think it would be very helpful to see that in the plans.
We can find a home for one someplace on the site. Hopefully it'll look good.
Mr. Carson?
Well, Sandy, do you want to, I think Steve
Anderson?
was first.
My question has to do with trees, even though I may have put myself out there earlier as not being a lover of the trees. I truly am. I'm looking at the email from Nate Malloy when you went before the Historical Commission. And interesting, the last couple of sentences I found very interesting. And having been on the site where the oak trees are, and the one that the sidewalk kind of curves around it and it's popping up out of the ground, the commission made the suggestion that whether the trees truly needed to be removed, and if discontinuing the sidewalk on that side, the church side, the UU side of the street, could help save the trees. They reasoned that there is an existing sidewalk on the north side of the street, the post office side, that pedestrians can use. And with the improvements to the alley along the southern side of the church, it may not be necessary to have a short segment of sidewalk along Kellogg Avenue on the property. So my question is, did you give that any thought? I think it's just a suggestion. I don't know how it.
The sidewalk is actually on town land.
Yes, but I think if the sidewalk were removed, yes, it would make it a nicer environment for the trees that are there now. Whether or not it would tip the scales and help save that one tree that might not be able to be saved, I don't know how much effect that would have. I think once we do our site inventory for the routes, we'll find out. If the town wants to consider removing that pedestrian link, that asphalt drive walkway along the south side of Kellogg, that's up to them. What's going to happen in this contract is the contractor's going to have to access the site over that sidewalk to make improvements and add the addition. Therefore, that sidewalk's going to probably be damaged to the point where the contractor's going to have to replace it in kind, which means that it's going to go back to an asphalt sidewalk like it is now, over the roots and so forth, and it's not accessible.
It looks
it's not very
awful.
attractive. Oh, it looks
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Schreiber?
I know this isn't our sidewalk or your sidewalk, but I think it's a terrible idea. I think that that's one of the busiest pedestrian areas of Amherst, and so I don't think that the alleyway between, I don't think the alleyway's even close to a substitute walk. It would just, yeah. So I hope that we not only don't support that, but perhaps speak against that.
Mr. Carson?
Yeah, I would like to echo that. I think in a downtown area to not have a sidewalk would be a big mistake. For one thing, people would just keep walking along there anyway, and it would just be a muddy trail, which can even add dangerous factors to it. I just think that would be a huge mistake.
Well, I wasn't proposing it.
I understand, yes.
I was just wondering what the thinking was after the comments made at the commission hearing.
Ms. Brestrup?
I think the planning board could offer recommendations on that, but I think that would be ultimately a decision of the select board because that's in the public way.
I'd love to see concrete pavers there instead of asphalt. I don't know if that's practical in that site. I don't know anything about it. It'd certainly look nicer. And it could flex without cracking for the roots, right?
David?
Yes, Mr. Carson?
That brings up a point I wanted to ask Chris. With the pavers that are there in the public way, the pavers that were put in the 1970s, obviously some of these are going to have to be lifted up to work on the oil tank. Has the town talked at all about repaving that area instead of putting back those pavers to make it more consistent with the downtown sidewalks, with the brick lacing and so forth?
It's certainly a topic of conversation, but there's no plan yet to do any work there, as far as I know.
Okay.
We have no word from the town engineer yet. I presume you've been working with him, but he hasn't submitted written comments on this. Is there anything that we should be aware of as far as the engineer's concerned?
No, I did meet with the town engineer midway through developing the plans just to talk about hookups and where, and I assume he got a copy of the plans, but he was on board with everything that was proposed, at least during our meeting. I know it's not in writing, but I can verbally say that he agreed with the plans.
Ms. Brestrup?
I did reach out to both the town engineer and the fire department about 2 weeks ago, and I had sent them a transmittal on this when we first received the application. So they were given the plans and then prodded once to respond, and we didn't hear anything. So usually in that case, they don't have any serious concerns.
Thank you. The design review board looked at this project and recommended it without conditions, but did express concerns about the oaks, which have already been addressed. And the lighting, they also asked about the lighting.
And the screening.
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 Of the condensers.
Of the condensers, yes. Okay. Any other questions from the board? Any questions from the public? Public comment? Yes, sir, please, come up.
Just want to preface my remarks by saying that I am very much in favor of the Unitarian Church going forward with this project and you granting approval, but I think Ms. Kruger brought up some points that are valid. Mr. Wells and his group took some license about showing things that were part of the site plan that weren't under the Unitarian Church's control. And some of the development that is being proposed is not on their property. So I don't know how this board conditions work on somebody else's property. I just wanted to bring that up. I've been cooperating with the church. I will continue to cooperate. The other thing I would like to mention is that the 5 parking spaces that are left there are critically important to the businesses in the area. And I have spoke with the church before about working with the town. I've also spoke with the town manager and the parking task force about trying to preserve those as 15-minute or short-term parking for the public. So those are my 2 concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else? Any other public comment? Or from staff?
I just wanted to note that I believe that the town manager is looking into the issue of parking and is talking to the Unitarian Church about that. And so I think that the issue of, whether they're 15-minute spaces or, what kind of spaces they are and what the lease agreement would be is kind of in his jurisdiction.
So my question being, we're being asked to waive the parking requirements, and I'm not going to even go into the details of what would be required under the zoning bylaw. And I am also, I'll back up a step. I'm super in favor of this project too. I love it. I love that you're restoring the windows and that the church is growing, and that infill is happening in a high-quality way right in the center of town. It's fantastic. That being said, those parking spaces are critical, and if we're going to grant a parking waiver, I'm trying to work some way how we could condition that on those being leased back to the town, and I think that may be outside the scope of our site plan review. But
Maybe we could recommend it?
we could recommend it, or I don't know what else. Mr. O'Keefe?
Are we in fact convinced that that would be outside the scope of our ability to grant, or to require as a condition?
Well, I think we could, we could deny the waiver of the parking.
No, I'm talking about a condition, approve the waiver, approve the project, to have a condition that requires that those spaces be leased to the town on an ongoing basis.
How does the applicant feel about such a condition?
We have every intention of negotiating a lease with the town. We just haven't, gotten the words in black and white. So, it will happen. As to whether it should be an absolute requirement, I'm not an attorney. I don't know whether that's an appropriate thing to require.
I'm an attorney and
or
I don't know
not.
either, so.
The original lease was based upon a redevelopment kind
That's
of
right.
land taking, so.
That's right.
My gut says there might be some legal thing here, but again, I'm no attorney.
So, I'm inclined to think along your lines, let's just put it in there as a condition, that because it's, we can put it in the language of, because they're asking for a waiver based on the municipal parking area, that those spaces be leased back to the town of Amherst.
If I might.
Yes, Ms. Kruger.
I'm concerned about making it contingent on the waiver of the parking because of its exemption as a religious use, and how limited we might be on some of our requirements. I would rather do other horse trading where they're asking for something that we really don't have to agree to in the site plan review process and trade. But I actually trust that they are going to lease, but if there's some way to gesture towards that in our condition, but I'd rather trade for something else than the waiver of the parking, because I think they probably get that anyway.
Yeah. Mr. Carson?
My concern would be making it a requirement could impede them in the future if they needed to redevelop the site yet again. I mean, we might be talking 50 years from now, but if they wanted to make some other sort of alteration, is that going to be an impediment because they have this agreement with the town about the 5 parking spaces?
For 10 years.
I mean, I don't know if that...
That could be the
fits
case
in.
regardless if they enter into a lease, so.
Well,
But I
this
see the
is-
condition will be on the
this
site
is-
plan.
This is going beyond a lease, it seems to me.
Yeah.
It's-
That's why, I mean, my initial concern was that it was beyond the scope of what we could do, but I was trying to find some way around it.
I will say it was an important concern from day one as part of the design process, preserving some parking and still being able to expand the building. So, you know, that was clearly our intent to offer these spots.
I mean, I'll admit to a selfish motive too, because I like to run in and get my Chinese food,
I
so.
do too.
It's gonna be a little bit harder now.
We all do.
Okay, I'm prepared to leave that alone. Mr. O'Keefe?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm prepared to accept at face value the applicant's statement that they fully intend to carry through that negotiation with the town.
Okay, anything else I think we can probably bring up as we go through the site plan review guidelines. This is section 11.24 of the zoning bylaw, and these are the criteria we use in evaluating all site plans. And I'm just going to go through them in order. There's kind of a lot of them, so be patient. And anyone from the board should just speak if you have something to bring up, rather than, because I won't see you raise your hand. Oh, wait a minute. We got to close the public hearing first.
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
All in favor? It's unanimous, thank you. Minus 1 abstention. Or he's not really abstaining, he's not here.
He's not here.
Okay. 11.240, conformance with appropriate provisions of zoning bylaw, check. 2401, protection of town amenities and abutting properties through minimizing detrimental or offensive actions. We don't have any of those. 2402, site characteristics. We have the issue of the screening of the condensers, and I think that we discussed having that be a condition, but I'll wait till Ms. Ford gets back to talk about that. 2403, recreational facilities, open space, and amenities. There's not really any open space on the lot. 2410, protection of unique or important natural, historic, or scenic features gets an A+. 2411, adequacy of refuse disposal. What is the trash disposal? It's probably in the management plan. I didn't read it, but, okay.
It's in the management plan, and basically, they're going to keep the trash in-house and then put it out on collection day.
Thank you. Okay, perfect, thank you. Sewage and water supply, those are taken care of. Drainage, there's already full lot coverage basically on this, so the drainage, I can't imagine is much different. And the town engineer hasn't expressed any concerns. 2414, landscaping, we did indicate possibly requesting a planting plan. Ms. Kruger, is that what you were talking about?
Right. Where the shrubs would go, or I don't know, something in a, it doesn't have to necessarily come back to this board rather
Could you
than-
just talk a little louder,
Oh,
Connie?
sorry. Some kind of a planting plan that shows where, what kind of plants are going in, what parts of the area to be planted, so that it's, doesn't end up to be just somebody's invasive plants that they dug out of their backyard and the 10-year-olds put in that day. Express my gravest fears.
Of 10-year-olds or invasive plants?
Both equally.
Okay, so we'll get back to the conditions in a minute. Soil erosion plan, I feel that's been adequately addressed by representations from the applicant. 2416, protection, air and water. I've always thought this was just a repeat of the first one. 2417, lighting. We've asked for the applicant to prepare a lighting plan that's sufficient to address our concerns. 2418, floods, et cetera, is not applicable. 2419, wetlands is not applicable. 2420, National Historic Register District.
This has to do with DRB, DRB criteria, and the DRB has reviewed this.
Right. So we'll skip that. 2421, setbacks, consistent with surrounding buildings and development, very much so. 2422 is inapplicable. 2423 is inapplicable. 2424, screening for storage areas. We talked about screening for the condensers. Was there something, you wanted to see a plan for screening for the condensers?
Or a proposal, at which time, at an appropriate time. And it may be that we just need to see them on site first. I'm not quite sure how to word it. But yeah, I think we need to see a proposal for screening at some point that
All right.
serves everybody's concerns here.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense to do that at a point where the questionable infrastructure is in place. And so
Yeah.
we can all stand there and say, yes, this makes sense.
Yeah, so come on, we'll ask you to just come back when you're ready to screen those in. And obviously, that's gonna be one of the very last things to go in, right? So,
We can bring our planting plan then, too.
That's right.
okay, perfect. And lighting.
They might want the lighting before.
You can do lighting before.
For that, yeah.
Okay. 24230, convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement. Did anybody have any concerns about safety between any of that pedestrian traffic? We all know the traffic pattern there. Curb cuts, no new curb cuts, right?
Correct.
2432, location and design of parking spaces. Those Rio's parking spaces are staying in the same spot. They're just gonna be relined.
Right.
And then bicycle rack. You felt confident you could fit a bicycle rack onto the site somewhere. So that's 2432. 2433 is not really applicable. 2434, inapplicable. 2435, inapplicable. 2436, traffic impact report. They've requested a waiver, and I can't see any reason not to grant it. And that's the end of the criteria. My list of conditions consists of a request for a screening proposal for the condensers, a planting plan, the location of a bike rack, and a lighting plan. Do I have that right? Anything I missed? All right, Mr. Schreiber.
I think somehow the concerns of Mr. Roberts need to be addressed, that maybe there's a revised site plan that grays out anything that's not on the actual property of the Unitarian Church.
And the purpose of that would be,
I'm just looking at it again, it's really not clear what is being promised or what can be promised and what isn't. You know, for example, beyond the benches, there are things being basically indicated in the site plan that appear to be, on somebody else's property.
I guess I see that the same way that architects sometimes put little people walking their dogs in their pictures.
Yeah, but the people aren't permanent, and people aren't real property. I think it's different.
Yeah,
Can I ask Mr. Schreiber a question?
yes.
I think that it wasn't clear totally in tonight's presentation, but thinking about it, what would we do differently if we absolutely knew? Because we kind of, like, if the benches aren't on their property, we can't really require them to do those. And was there anything else that would actually change in our decision-making if we had a better demarcation?
I just think that the concern that was expressed by Mr. Roberts is a very real concern, that by approving the site plan as presented, basically in our packets with these conditions, we are tacitly approving the whole
Benches,
thing.
yeah.
Well, I guess we can, it goes without saying that our site plan review is limited to the applicant's property, and that we cannot
Well,
approve.
plus improvements to the public way, sometimes, we can, in
Yeah.
fact, yeah.
But there aren't any of those.
Sending you an amended plan that made it clear where that demarcation was, if that
It's shown on the plans, it's just, I didn't present it that way, I presented it as a whole, but the property line shows drawn right.
Yes, Ms. Ford?
Yeah, would it be possible just to add a sentence or two? It's not necessarily conditioned, but just saying that we're recommending approval of this plan for the, just clarifying, saying for the property of the church, and any, improvements that are shown on the plan that are not on the property, aren't, would it make sense to actually make
Yeah, we
that
can put
statement?
that, we can
Yeah,
put that in
just
the
to be-
decision. Would that address your concerns, Mr. Schreiber?
Sort of, except the,
Like that
can't
we're
see
not
any
approving the benches, that we're not,
Then we, we're clearly saying that we're not approving anything that's not on the property.
I think one of the issues I'm having is I cannot see labeling of property lines on the
On the site plan?
site plan, nor the kind of the standard property line indicators.
Ms. Brestrup?
The property line runs right along the place where the building bulges out on the south side.
No, I
So the
understand
property line is parallel with that. But I wanted to point out that there are site improvements that I think need to go in as part of this work that include pavers along Mr. Roberts' property, including that entryway into the ramp that's shown as mimicking the stained glass window. So I wonder if you wanted to ask Mr. Roberts if there are parts of this that he would be willing to state in public that he would go along with, because they seem integral to this plan. And if you say that you're not approving those, I'm not sure where those are left.
Mr. Roberts, would you mind joining us for a moment, please?
Oh, yeah, that new custom window paver is not, I just realized that, it's on the other side of the property line.
It doesn't get it gets a little more complicated than that. I own the fee, the underlying property. The town of Amherst has an easement over that. Okay, it is not entirely in my jurisdiction as to what can be done on my property.
So,
I mean, the town is the only one that has an easement on my property. The Unitarian Church does not have an easement on the property. I'm not saying I'm not willing to give them an easement, but how do we lay another easement on top of the easement that's already there? That has to be figured out by somebody smarter than me. So there, it's just not that simple, you know? I've seen their plan, you know, I think it's conducive to what Boatwood Walk should be. But, you know, it's just, that's why I brought up the point. I mean, you're saying, yes, they can make this entry. I can't guarantee you that they can, just because the two of us agree. The Unitarian Church and Barry Roberts agrees. We
So-
don't know if the town of Amherst agrees.
But you're saying that you don't have any objection to it?
No.
As presented here, that's anything?
As long as we can work out the easements.
Right, with the town.
Oh, well,
Right.
that's
And me.
different.
If they're gonna build something on my land like the town did, then they need to have an easement. They being the Unitarian Church.
But they're not currently proposing anything, right? They have to disturb the site,
No,
but they're not.
No, there, if you
Built
look
on
at
my
this, there's
property.
quite a,
The
yeah.
paved area around the.
Yeah. All of this is the line right here.
Yeah.
So all of this, that whole paving pattern of the Tiffany window and all this paving here and all this extension back to this path here, this is all this portion here is on.
Oh, is
Barry
on,
Roberts
on Barry
slash
Roberts'
town.
property with a town easement.
Right.
Laying over the top of my property.
I got it. Okay. Ms. Kruger?
Would that mean we would be approving this concept as shown to us in the plan on both properties with the understanding that if this couldn't be worked out in terms of the legal limitations of the easements, somebody would have to come back for a revision or an amendment to this plan, because we can't anticipate, so we can still
So we could
approve
say
it
that, yeah.
in concept as shown, understanding that if there were significant changes or whatever the word is, it would come back.
Yeah, and that's the case with every site
Yeah,
plan, right?
right.
So if it doesn't work out,
See you later.
We'll see you again.
Yeah.
and it'll be quicker next time.
Let's just assume they don't have to come back.
All right. Ms. Brestrup, did you get those conditions when I read them?
Did.
All right. Does somebody want to make a motion?
May I just ask a question?
Yes.
Were you going to make a condition with regard to the easements, or just not deal?
I don't think we need to. Mr. Carson?
Could we also consider adding a recommendation to the select board to maintain the sidewalk on Kellogg Avenue?
I think, if I may, you might want to do that in a letter, a separate letter
Okay,
to the select board.
okay.
Yeah, it's not really part of the site plan
Right.
review. But that makes sense. We'd be happy to do that. I'll be happy to sign a letter for that. Mr. O'Keefe?
I move that the board approve site plan review SPR 2013-0010/M17206 for the Unitarian Universalist Society of Amherst with the conditions already cited, the board's standard conditions, and the requested waivers.
Second.
Except we took away one of the waivers.
We did. We took away the lighting plan.
Thank you.
The waivers requested, I'll state them for the record, are the sign plan, soil erosion plan, traffic impact statement, and the waiver from the parking requirements.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, and
Thank
I do
you.
mean thank you.
Yeah, it's gonna be a great project,
Yes.
yeah.
We'll be excited to see it.
We will too. It's been 90 years in coming.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Anderson.
I need to leave.
We'll take a 5-minute break.
But you have to be back.
We're gonna go through this next part really fast.
Coffee.
Brestrup to get back. Can I ask what you guys are here for?
So, I'm here for the Amherst College
Okay,
project. I'm here for the Fit Women's Center.
okay. We're gonna, I think, skip ahead to those and get you guys out of here.
To what? What is he here for?
They're items 7A and 8A.
The 11 p.m.
Midnight show. Midnight madness. That was a non-controversial thing.
Kidding.
A what?
Chris, I was just saying that I think we'll skip ahead to the other applicants we have here before we attend to any of our other business. So why don't you come on forward and tell us what you got?
Like you said, I'm just here for the approval of a sign on the Market Center.
So we had asked, let me see, so you're proposing to put a sign saying "Fit Women" to replace the current sort of hanging sign there?
Correct.
And will it be lighted?
The one on the one on the street will be backlit. This one will not be.
And Ms. Brestrup, does this comply with all of our requirements, or?
I believe it does. I believe they're taking up the same space as the sign that had been there previously for De Palma Salon.
Correct.
Could you ask the gentleman to identify himself?
Oh, yes, could you identify yourself, please, for the
Peter
record?
Peter
Earl.
Brook,
Earl. E-A-R-L-E.
E-R-L-E. Are you with
I'm the leaseholder.
leaseholder? Thank you.
Who's doing the work for you?
It is a company called, Neapola Signs up in Keene.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Mr. Rosner?
Just to be clear, you're going to be eliminating the white sign?
Correct.
Okay.
Move to approve. Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? You're approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
for
for your
waiting.
patience. If you ever decide to take on a bigger project, you'll know what you're up against.
Hopefully I'll be there, though. Thank you very much.
I was,
Welcome.
maybe he was a contractor or something.
Identify yourself for the record.
My name is Louis Schiller. I'm with the Amherst College Design and Construction Group of the Facilities Department. And the reason that we're here is an informational filing for ongoing, some changes to the ongoing work at the Pratt Field Athletic Complex, where we're upgrading the facility and building some new buildings there. In conjunction with that, with those improvements, we have demolished several old outbuildings that were in the wetlands buffer along the rail trail. Consequently, the college is looking to construct 2 new small buildings to replace some of that. Actually, one is a new building to serve athletic storage, and that will be a two-story structure on the south side of the Gooding Field. And it'll be set in a hill, and that's the reason why it's 2 stories. There'll be access from 2 levels. The other is to actually rebuild an existing storage shed that is located on the south side of the building. Part of it's actually in the wetlands buffer. And that will continue to serve as a storage shed for the grounds department. So these are both unoccupied storage buildings. They won't have any heat, they won't have any plumbing, they're just outbuildings, but they're a change to the previous plan. Any questions so far?
None so far. Ms. Brestrup, did staff have any concerns about this?
Well, this is the type of thing that the zoning bylaw requires that the applicant submit 60 days prior to the start of construction. So the reason they're submitting it is just for your information. It's in the educational district, so there aren't any formal reviews that the planning board has. So he's just coming to, Mr. Schiller is just coming to present this project for your information.
All right, well,
It is my understanding that the 60-day requirement is enforced by the, and forgive me if I have the titles incorrect, but the Chief Zoning Officer, which is Rob Mora. So I guess the Article 3.21, which requires a 60-day waiting period, is for new construction and significant change in use. Since this is reconstructing and replacing existing storage buildings as part of the athletic facility, we don't think it would qualify as a change in use. And since we're doing this as part of the overall construction project, I think it might be considered an ancillary function, and our question for this board is, if the Chief Enforcement Officer were to consider this to be not a significant new construction or a change in use, if this board would have any objection to his ruling that way.
shake your head
Waiving
now.
the 60-day requirement.
I don't see anybody jumping out of their seat and yelling, so I think you're probably okay. I don't think you're gonna get a formal
I don't expect it.
from
I'm
us,
only
but-
asking if there are any objections.
But I think we're all set unless someone else is different. We appreciate your coming in and giving us this informational filing, and hope you learned something from the Unitarian Society.
No, well, I understand the function of this board, and I don't have any objection to it. It's a lot of hard work on your part, and I think it's very good of you to do that. The importance of good planning is important to any community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next is our warrant review, which consists of stating that we have received the warrant and asking if anybody has any comments or questions. We have some articles that we're going to be bringing to town meeting, as you all know. We need to decide who's going to present those. We have, today we approved both of these, which gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, plus the one that we're not. There's one on here, Article 36 isn't ours, so I'm not sure we have a mover and speaker for it.
I think you were going to have a speaker.
We'll have a speaker but not a mover, right? Okay. All right, starting with converted dwelling standards and conditions. Be nice to split this up a little bit. Again, it's the planning board's practice, and Mr. Tucker not being here, I will say it, to show up at town meeting when our articles are being presented. We've all done this already. And if anybody feels strongly about any of these, I don't recall any no votes on any of these. So anybody could move and speak these. We do need a town meeting member to move them. Who here on the board is a town meeting member? So we have 3 of you?
Mr. Chair, if I could just interject, partly coming out of some of the conversations we had at the zoning subcommittee today and even earlier, we were working on a concept of taking the 3 mixed-use, mixed-center amendments and kind of seeing them together in some way. They're not actually in order together, which Mr. Crowner will talk about in our committee report, but maybe using some of the time allotted, you get as a default 5 minutes for each presentation, to do a kind of an overview of the 3 together with maybe a commitment to town meeting to take less time when we actually introduce each one, so that we could talk about how they interrelate and give some background and some of the comprehensive nature of those 3. So we might want to think about those 3 together for a grouping of presenters as they interrelate.
Thank you, Ms. Kruger. Ms. Ford?
Sounds like, well, it sounds like you're making a case for there being one speaker to all of that, instead of, I mean, that's how I would, you know, if you're gonna, if the idea is conceptually to present it as a package or as a, then one person's gonna speak to that, right?
If I might, I don't know if it would be 1 or 2 or 3, but what we had a extra zoning subcommittee meeting last week to just talk about presentation ideas and what maps and things to start working on, sketching out those 3. That doesn't mean that by working on them we're necessarily, those people are necessarily the presenters, because it's going to be up to tonight, but we started thinking about it conceptually as together. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, so it's also good when we have semi-controversial articles that it doesn't appear to be coming from one person. It's not one person's idea, that it's all of our idea, hopefully. So breaking up them into 2 or 3 speakers, I think, would be a good idea. We also talked about, as Connie said, an introduction, and we were hoping that maybe the chair would provide an introduction. This is why we're presenting these articles. This is how they work together. And then for each article, say, this is what this article actually does. This will be the effect of the article.
I see. I misunderstood. I thought you were saying, let's group all the minutes that we have for each of these and do a presentation for all 3 of them at the same time. I mean, referencing them, but you're saying something different, I think.
I think, so we have a total for 30, 31, and 32, correct, is the ones we're talking about?
31, 32, and 36, I think.
35.
35. It's
31,
31,
35,
32,
sorry.
and 35.
Okay, so for those, for those 3, your suggestion would be for me to do a introduction on our reasons for doing these. And then out of the allotted 15 minutes to say, well, we'll take, you know, how do you divide this up?
So you take 6 or 7 for the intro, and then whatever's left you divide up.
Well, so it would be, for example, 6 for the intro, and then you would have,
3 minutes for each one after that.
yeah.
I don't know if that would be.
Yeah, or
I don't
ask
know
for
if
extra time.
But I don't think I would need that long.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But some breakdown like that, yes.
I mean, and the first one would be mixed-use building standards and conditions, so that's not a simple one, but,
And by the way, I'm working on an overall draft of all these, so I can provide you with an outline that you can either read from or adapt or whatever.
Great.
If you were willing to do that, so.
Okay.
One-
Mr. O'Keefe?
One last question on that. Have you considered asking town meeting to consider 35 immediately after 32?
Yeah, we also have ideas about that.
Okay.
So, I guess I can say that now. The package is 31, 32, and 35. However, 35, in a way, builds on 33, which is also dealing with non-conforming uses and structures. We're setting up a system or a standard whereby in the business zones, there's one track for a permit on a non-conforming use rather than two tracks or multiple tracks. And then we're adding a new section to the non-conforming uses article. So it might actually make sense to keep those two together. What we're thinking is that 34 is sort of a wild card and not really, it doesn't have to be in any particular order. So our idea was that we might move Article 34 to the end or to the beginning. And we thought that decision might not have to be made until the night of. If it looks like we're going to come to 9:45 and have, Article 31, we might make sense to move 34 then and do 34 and then just start fresh with 31 the next day. Or if we're at 33 and we still have half an hour left, skip 34 and go to 35. We want to be able to make that decision on the fly. And so that's the thought there.
Thank you.
I'll be happy to leave the vagaries of parliamentary procedure to you, Mr. Crown.
I can't do it. I'm not a
Oh, yeah.
town meeting member. Would have to be that guy.
To Mr. O'Keefe. So that being said, we need movers and speakers for these, and we don't necessarily have to decide it now, but I'm happy to know in advance what I'm expected to do, Ms. Brestrup.
The Select Board likes to know in advance, too, so they've asked that we submit a list of movers and speakers by the 19th of April.
It's Friday.
So, who made them the boss?
Yeah.
Who tied and made them both?
So, all right, so let's just do this thing. Let's not waste any more time here. Who wants to move Article 30, converted dwelling standards and conditions? Mr. O'Keefe?
I'm not unwilling to do that. I just wanted to say that, I say this every town meeting, is that we should focus our effort on the speakers, to figure out who all the speakers are, and then figure out the movers, because it makes sense for if the speaker is a town meeting member, by default, they should be moving it, and otherwise we'll just assign Ms. Kruger, myself, or Mr. Schreiber to move the other ones that aren't being spoken to.
I'm happy to be a mover,
Or any.
just to get it done.
Okay, so, all right, I'm going to take these out of order then. Who wants to do the fraternity district one? Because that's the easiest one. Mr. Schreiber? All right.
Oh, except we were going to figure out if that's improper because I work at UMass.
But it's not their property, you pointed out.
I'll do the,
If anybody objects, someone else will
get
do
them
it.
down.
I can't imagine that's going to be a problem. So we have Schreiber. Okay. Converted dwellings, standard and conditions. Mr. O'Keefe? Mixed-use buildings, standards and conditions. Now, this one falls into the 31, 32, 35 zone, where I propose to do an intro, and then someone else will present the actual pieces.
I'm happy to be part of a team where we decide, maybe strategically as we go through our preparation, who does which part. I mean, I'm most interested in 31, but I'm
Okay, then you
happy to take it as,
I'm fine with 32, so
all right, you are, good.
Excellent.
32.
Kruger will do 31.
I'll shoot myself later.
Crowner will do 32.
Excuse me, if Crowner does 32, who will, we haven't done movers yet, never mind.
And 35, we'll do next. Who wants to do 35? I mean, I don't mind doing one. If anybody else wants to. I'll wind up 35.
I can do it, I guess.
Or you want to do it?
Because you're doing
Yeah, okay. Great. And that leaves 33, non-conforming uses and structures.
I can do that one.
Excellent.
Sorry, who's 35?
35 is Crowner. So we have 30 O'Keefe, 31 Kruger, 32 Crowner, 33 Schreiber, 34 Schreiber, 35 Crowner, and an intro by Weber. All right, we also need a speaker for the zoning petition, the lot change, the spot zoning. Anyone want to? Oh, I didn't call it that.
Do we need a speaker for this? Or is this just something where the moderator asks, did planning board take a position on this? Do we?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And just say a couple sentences.
I think a couple sentences would be in order, not just, we approved it, but why.
That we found it in keeping with the master plan, blah,
As-
blah, blah.
I'm wondering if our chair would be willing to take that on.
I wasn't here that night, so.
Sure, I'll review the minutes and I'll do it. It's fine. Unless someone else wants to. That would be fine. All right, good. Now we just need people to move these things.
Right, so I was just going to point out that 30, 31, 33, and 34, the way that shook out, were all town meeting members. So we just need someone to move 32 and 35, which are the ones that Mr. Crowner is speaking to. My math is correct.
Maybe because I'm going to be speaking on that, those would be the other two that I would move.
Sure.
Just 'cause I'll-
So for movers, we have 30 O'Keefe.
You're doing 30.
31 Kruger, 32 Kruger, 33 Schreiber, 34 Schreiber, 35 Kruger. 36 does not have a mover.
That's yeah, the petitioner, not us.
Did I get all that right?
Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
Three's so good. I have
Thank you, everyone. Back to our agenda. Zoning Subcommittee report, very quickly.
There's nothing else. We've done it.
Excellent.
We've covered it.
Public comment period is not going to happen because we have no public. Unless, yeah, okay, we did that. Any topics not reasonably anticipated or A&Rs or anything like that, Chris?
No. Mr. Tucker pointed out a few things about the warrant, and I wonder if you would want to hear about this. About Article number 6, he said that you already approved the acceptance of Olympia Drive, so that wasn't a problem. Article 16, he pointed out that it's the operating budget and it includes the planning department and conservation and development. So that may be something that you would want to be aware of, the discussion, and support the planning department.
Keep our staff.
Yep. Article 40 is a petition article. It has to do with general bylaws that relate to documents having to do with rentals. And Mr. Tucker says that those, there is already a document that is written by the state and it's online, so he thinks that Article 40 is not really necessary because that information is already out there and it's available to the public. Article 41, he pointed out that it has to do with no parking except on pavement, and that was actually dropped from the rental registration bylaw because it was too close to zoning, and he didn't think that the Attorney General would approve that, because it's not something that should be in the general bylaw, it's something that should be in zoning bylaw. So he wanted me to point those issues out to you.
I presume that he will, on that last one, he'll be asked to weigh in on it at town meeting.
I believe he would be.
Any concerns from the board on those?
I have an additional one in the warrant. It's always tricky 'cause it's so late, I hate to do anything, but Article 26, Town Gown Strategic Planning. I read about this in the paper, and then it's in Article 26. See if the town will appropriate and transfer $30,000 from free cash in the undesignated fund balance of the general fund for a town gown strategic planning study in partnership with the University of Massachusetts. And what I understand from what I read in the paper, this is proposed as a joint UMass town effort to hire a consultant to do some planning on economic development and housing issues. So I didn't know, I mean, no one's talked to us about it, but if we have seems like it crosses over into some of our planning concerns.
Who from the town is signing on to this thing?
I believe that the town manager is talking to the university about this, and not much about it has filtered down to staff level.
Sort of same kind of thing happened with the ARA a few years ago. Okay. Anybody want to touch that hot potato, feel free.
It would be nice to know more about it. I don't know, it seems like asking for money for something that we don't know anything about. I don't know, is there anything we can do to ask for more information? Though it's intended?
I could ask Jonathan Tucker and Dave Zomek if they can find out more about it.
I guess it would matter if they want to solicit our support for this, because I'm like not supporting it really right now because they just have questions and I don't know anything about it.
I'm not a town meeting member, so.
So it doesn't matter, yeah. But a positive recommendation from the planning board, if they want it, would mean coming in and talking to us. Otherwise, just take
Well, I mean,
shot.
I can call
Right,
John
yeah.
too and just ask him.
I would agree with you. I don't feel comfortable advocating for it if we don't know anything about it.
Right, and so, okay.
It's kind of in our bailiwick. Maybe, could be.
All right. Agreed. Is there anyone who has anything compelling to say on any additional agenda items? Ms. Brestra?
I wanted to talk a little about town meeting nights and what your thoughts are regarding meeting on town meeting nights. Mr. Crowner has suggested that the planning board meet on town meeting nights when zoning amendments will be coming up. And so we think that zoning amendments will be coming up in the middle of May, possibly by the third week of May. So you have, that could be May 20th and May 22nd, May 29th. Anyway, I just wanted to alert you to that, and I would probably send out an email based on Mr. Crowner and Mr. Weber, and Mr. Tucker's advice to me about whether they felt they wanted to meet on a certain night or not, and it would be kind of short notice. And I would need to find out if these dates were appropriate pretty quickly because I have to post the meetings. So I just wanted to alert you to this topic coming up. The other thing is there are 2 nights that are town meeting nights when you are scheduled to have meetings already. One is May 15th and one is May 29th. And since you have 3 board members who are town meeting members who would obviously want to also go to town meeting, what you could consider doing is meeting early. Sometimes you have done this in the past, met like at 5 o'clock on town meeting nights to deal with any business that comes up, you know, in the interim, like site plan reviews or anything that the planning board would normally need to review. So I'm coming to you to ask you if you wanted to do it, or whether you want me to kind of try to keep your slate clear and not meet during those town meeting nights.
Are we definitely scheduled for the 29th? Because that would be
No.
the third. That would be the
It
third.
would be the third,
The third
yes.
meeting, but so
right.
that's technically not a,
We have this room scheduled, and I
Okay.
can schedule a room over in the middle school if you wanted to, so. You are scheduled to meet the 1st of May, and then, right now, also the 15th and the 29th. You can say you don't want to meet on the 29th, and you can say you don't want to meet on the 15th either, but there are, continuing things that come up to us, and people ask,
well, I'm not.
when can I be put on the planning board agenda? And so I sort of want to know whether you're intending to meet those nights or not.
So if we do meet on the 29th, then we meet again on June 3rd, or 5th? That's why I'm just, I don't have 29th on my calendar right now, so
No, I don't either.
So do you want to say by consensus that you don't want to meet on the 29th?
Yes.
Right, yeah, that's
Yes,
too
no?
much. Yes to no.
Yes to no. And what about the 15th? Is that a night when you would consider meeting at 5 and adjourning by 6:30 and having your town meeting members be able to go off to town meeting?
My thinking would be that we focus those pre-town meeting, planning board meetings on the nights that we're actually having, presenting stuff before town meeting. Unless there's something that comes up on a deadline that we have to do, like an A&R or something. And the A&Rs are quick, so.
Okay, so in general, you would prefer not to meet on the 15th unless there's a town meeting issue that comes up?
I think so, unless someone wants to. You're getting us at a bad time.
Yeah, this should have come up really early.
All right, well, I can always do this by email too, but I.
Yes, good idea. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.